Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Friday, the 17th of July. These are your headlines. Andy Burnham becomes Labour leader today with a set-piece lunchtime speech. Pressure now on to pick the right Chancellor. Meanwhile, his predecessor gives his final interview as Prime Minister, insisting he left the country better than he found it. Multiple experts tell a Sky News investigation all the evidence points towards the US being responsible for a deadly attack on an Iranian primary school. President Trump accuses China of committing 2020 election fraud and orders an FBI investigation. And we'll see what's making headlines in today's papers with the political commentator Benedict Spence. Good morning. After an unchallenged run, Andy Burnham becomes Labour leader today. He begins with a set-piece speech this lunchtime, which we'll be bringing to you live on Sky News. His promise that he will make the party unashamedly Labour. We're still waiting on his first major decision, though. Who will be Chancellor? Well, there's a few options in the mix. Shabana Mahmood is the favourite to take over at the Treasury, though reports suggest she's keen to remain at the Home Office. Ed Miliband, a.k.a. Red Ed, is being pushed by many in the party. He worked at the Treasury under Gordon Brown and would likely receive the backing from financial markets. And another potential, Yvette Cooper, who claims years of experience in government. Well, let's cross over to Westminster and speak to our political correspondent, Lucy McDade. Lucy, we haven't heard much from Andy Burnham on who might be Chancellor. We've got this speech coming at midday. Do we know any more detail on who could be Chancellor?
Yeah, good morning. Well, opposition politicians have been criticising Andy Burnham over the past few weeks. They say they haven't heard much of his plan. In terms of who he will appoint to cabinet, there has been so much speculation. The argument from Andy Burnham's team has been that he will not be making any decisions or announcements until he becomes Prime Minister on Monday. Today, though, as you say, that is where the Labour Party will be effectively crowning their new leader. In some times, we would have a contest and the winner of that would be announced today. But Andy Burnham being backed by 379 Labour MPs means that there has been no contest, and overwhelmingly he will lead the party and then become Prime Minister on Monday. We will see him go to Downing Street and go to the King on Monday. Today is for the party, though. We will get a speech from Mr Burnham, who until just last month was the Mayor of Greater Manchester, not even an MP. He won that by-election in Makerfield today, talking about what his direction for the party will be. As you just said there, he will talk about being unashamedly Labour. He will say that he will have the courage to fix the big things that he says politics have neglected for many years. We have heard a little bit about what Andy Burnham's vision for the country will be. He talks a lot about devolution, extending powers out to local areas over things like housing and transport, a community-focused approach to our politics. And we also know that he will talk today about greater public control. He'll also, over utilities, energy, water. He'll also, importantly, pay tribute to Keir Starmer, who he is taking over.
Well, we'll be bringing you that speech live at midday on Sky News. Lucy, do stay with us, because as Burnham arrives, his predecessor has given his final interview as Prime Minister. Speaking to our Beth Rigby, Sir Keir Starmer insisted that he left the country in a better position than he found it.
It's good to know that actually after what's been quite a rough few months, that you are very optimistic actually about walking out of the door.
I go with pride. I go knowing that I leave the country in a better state than I found it, and I go knowing I've left the foundation for Labour to win the next general election.
Yeah.
And I go out and I will immediately that afternoon spend time with Vic and the kids, and I look forward to that. As
you hand on the baton, you believe that you set Andy Burnham up to win the next general election, and part of the next phase of this administration's success is your success.
I hope so. We've built the foundation for this now. And Labour can go on and win that election. I think we'll go on and win that election. I'm proud to hand over the party in good shape to Andy Burnham, hand over the country in good shape to Andy Burnham. I will support him all the way. I'll give advice if it's asked for, and I'll give it privately. I will not give advice if it's not asked for, and I certainly won't give it publicly. I will give my full support, and that is what I mean. I want my country to thrive, and I'm sure it'll be a great success going forward.
Lucy, what do you make of his words there?
Well, it was an incredibly honest and at times quite vulnerable interview with Beth Rigby. He spoke about the intensely difficult decision to effectively end a political career, and that is effectively what Keir Starmer has chosen to do. He also spoke about his family, which Keir Starmer has done previously, but I don't think we've seen it so openly as we did in that final interview. And I suppose leaving as Prime Minister, there is an element where Keir Starmer would be a little bit more honest and open. He talks about those arson attacks against his family home, the effect that that had on him. He speaks about how his wife Vic has been there for the most challenging times, and now looking forward to spending more time with his family. He also speaks there about, wishing Andy Burnham the greatest of successes. It's no coincidence, I don't think, that Keir Starmer chose to spend his final days as Labour leader and Prime Minister in Ukraine. That's where that interview took place. It is on the world stage that many hold Keir Starmer in the greatest of respects and feel that his legacy will be very positive because of what he's done on the international stage. He was there to say that even under Andy Burnham, support for Ukraine will be steadfast. He was there to announce further funding for them. So fitting that his last few days would be in Ukraine, and he was presented there with, I think, one of the highest honours, the Order of Freedom, from the Ukrainian President Zelensky.
Lucy, thanks very much for that. Lucy McDade, our political correspondent in Westminster there for us. And we'll be bringing you Beth's full interview with Sir Keir Starmer just after 6:30. Now, 7 independent experts have concluded that all the evidence points towards the US being responsible for a deadly attack on an Iranian primary school. Their comments contradict Donald Trump's repeated claims that the US might not be behind the bombing on the first day of the war. They're responding to a major Sky News investigation into the bombing, which also found that precision weapons were used, as our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire reports.
There is no doubt that this was a school and that 120 children were killed when the missiles hit Minab. But ever since the strike on the very first day of the war, the US has produced conflicting claims at the highest levels about why it was hit and who hit it.
It's horrible what happened, but there were missiles flying all over the place. And somebody said it was our missile. Well, maybe it wasn't our missile, but I've seen nothing to lead me to believe it was. If you come up with the right answer, I don't think it's going to be us.
Well, we can give an answer, and our investigation shows that this wasn't just missiles flying around. This was a precision strike. All the evidence points to US responsibility. 7 independent experts agreed with that conclusion. We spent months combing through footage and satellite imagery to understand the layout of the school. We then worked with research agency Forensic Architecture to rebuild the school virtually, using frames from the videos we found to create a photorealistic 3D layout. We combined that with post-strike footage to show where the missile hit. Here you can see the crater it left, the yellow circle, right in the middle of the school. This is the assembly hall, and it's where witnesses have told us teachers gathered children for their safety after they heard the news that the war had started. That precision strike is exactly how the US carries out attacks.
Well, I can tell you that looking at that post-strike imagery, I knew right off the bat that this was either a US or Israeli strike. You had points of impact that were near dead center in each of these, 7 to 9 buildings that were hit, including the school. This is our common technique, at least for buildings of that size, where you can penetrate through to the center of that building, have ammunition that will be contained, where the blast will be contained inside that building.
If it was just the school that had been hit, it might be possible to blame an errant missile. But this was a pattern for the wider complex in Minab, including other civilian buildings. Sky's Data and Forensics Unit has investigated the site. This is that complex that lay next to but separate from the school. It was associated with an Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps missile brigade. Experts told us it was likely administrative in nature. We can reveal that at least 9 of the sites were used by civilians. 5 of them were hit, all right in the center. This was a clinic and pharmacy, also made public on Instagram and widely reported in local media. It was a well-known landmark in Minab, administered by the IRGC, but used by the public. This was a cultural center. You can see on satellite imagery that both buildings were leveled. The school children often visited the auditorium inside. Several of the children you see in this video were killed in the strike on the school. Each yellow dot represents a missile strike on the complex. You can see the clear pattern of attack. Tomahawk missiles were used in the strike, and the US is the only belligerent in this war that has them. We also know that one US carrier strike group was in range of Minab. 3 of the ships are Tomahawk capable, and footage publicized by the US shows the USS Spruance firing them towards Iran on the day of the attack. This is all information that is publicly available, even if it took us some digging. The US military has far more resources and a strong moral imperative to identify whether a target is used by civilians. Whatever calculations were made, they went ahead with the strike. And that decision killed scores of children. Tom Cheshire, Sky News.
President Trump has accused China of committing electoral fraud in 2020. The US president said that China wanted him to lose the election and has accused the country of trying to manufacture illegal ballots for Joe Biden.
Over a period of years, starting during the 2020 election cycle, the People's Republic of China carried out what is believed to be the largest compromise of election data in history, resulting in China's illicit acquisition of 220 million U.S. voter files. That information includes names, addresses, phone numbers, political party preferences, and other sensitive data that would be needed to register to vote and engage in other nefarious activities, which is exactly what was happening.
Let's get the latest from our US correspondent, James Matthews.
It's not the first time we've heard Donald Trump question his country's election system. He has long argued that he lost the 2020 election because it was rigged, even though that is a claim that has been debunked through the years. As he spoke last night, the White House released newly declassified documents, even if they didn't necessarily back up his claims of election interference. Trump said that China had worked to undermine his first administration and his 2020 campaign. That is a claim that his own intelligence agencies dismissed at the time. He said that China had illegally acquired 220 million voter files, even though that's something that can be accessed publicly. As an address to the nation, it was very much a high-profile assault on the integrity of America's voting system by its president. Trump has an eye on November's midterm elections, and he ended his address last night by urging support for legislation that he wants to introduce, the Save America Act. That would require more stringent checks on voter eligibility. He says it's designed to prevent election fraud. His critics say he wants to restrict his opponent's vote.
Well, before President Trump started speaking, a spokesperson from the Chinese embassy in Washington said that Beijing has never and will never interfere in presidential elections in the US. Coming up, will Thomas Tuchel stay on as England head coach after their World Cup exit? We'll have the latest on his future next.
Opening hours of the war on Iran, a primary school was hit by a missile designed to blow up military bunkers.
What I've seen, that was done by Iran.
We've been investigating.
Can you explain why you cannot reveal what happened in Minab?
Denial, denial.
And we've travelled to Minab.
Grave after grave is overwhelming.
To gather evidence and talk to victims.
I just have a question, why?
An interview that lasted nearly 5 minutes. We talked about Prime Minister Starmer. We talked about the special relationship with who he said. It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
Everything in America feels kind of torn in two right now, and it has been an intense few weeks for Minneapolis.
How many more people have to die?
This is not America.
A large and growing protest movement. They're vocal and they're angry.
These immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
We just arrived in Doha, just ahead of President Trump, and look at that. The horse-backed military and beyond them, the skyline of a city transformed.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
What do America's Christian faithful make of the president's pop at the Pope?
The ones that vote for him are going to vote for him through thick and thin.
Before anybody criticizes the Pope, they need to think more than twice.
Mark Stone from Sky News. Will you stop buying Russian energy? Is there any assurance for Palestinian self-determination? Of course. It's a big shift by President Trump.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's a big shift. It's very positive.
Sky News, the full story first.
Time for some sport now.
The first time I drove a Formula One car was 1983, the end of the season, when McLaren decided to give three of us a chance in F1. And one was Stefan Bellof, the German driver who would become my teammate at Tyrrell the following year. The other was Ayrton Senna, who I'd had a massive fight with in the Formula 3 season. And of course, I was the third driver. And we got to drive this beautiful McLaren. It just felt incredibly fast, but we were at home. We all did very similar times, lap times. John Watson set the benchmark for us as the works McLaren driver at the time. And then somehow Ayrton Senna negotiated a second go and went a bit faster than us, which was quite interesting actually when I think about the years that were ahead of us. All three of us were in F1 the following season, so it went well. Last time you wish you were back in the car rather than behind the mic. Pretty much every Grand Prix, to be honest, but you have to sort of let these things go eventually.
Time for a look at the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Today looks mainly dry and very warm, locally hot, but heat wave conditions will become largely confined to the southwest this weekend. It's mostly warm and dry out there now, but misty low cloud over northern and eastern parts will bring the risk of drizzle. That cloud will mostly clear to coastal regions this morning to leave plenty of sunshine, but northeast England and northern Scotland look slow to brighten. Further drizzly outbreaks are possible there. It'll be a bit less hot, although some southern parts may still reach 30 Celsius.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Still to come, we'll discuss the stories making headlines in today's papers with our panellist, Benedict Spence.
Opening hours of the war on Iran, a primary school was hit by a missile designed to blow up military bunkers.
What I've seen, that was done by Iran.
We've been investigating.
Can you explain why you cannot reveal what happened in Minab?
Denial, denial.
And we've travelled to Minab.
Grave after grave is overwhelming.
To gather evidence and talk to victims.
I just have a question, why?
An interview that lasted nearly 5 minutes. We talked about Prime Minister Starmer. We talked about the special relationship with who he said. It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to in the Rose Garden?
in the East Wing.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
Everything in America feels kind of torn in two right now, and it has been an intense few weeks for Minneapolis.
How many more people have to die?
This is not America.
A large and growing protest movement. They're vocal and they're angry.
These immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
We just arrived in Doha, just ahead of President Trump, and look at that. The horse-backed military, and beyond them, the skyline of a city transformed.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
What do America's Christian faithful make of the president's pop at the Pope?
The ones that vote for him are going to vote for him through thick and thin.
Before anybody criticizes the Pope, they need to think more than twice.
Mark Stone from Sky News. Will you stop buying Russian energy? Is there any assurance for Palestinian self-determination? Of course. It's a big shift by President Trump.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's a big shift. It's very positive.
Sky News, the full story first.
Time to see what's making headlines in today's papers in our news review. I'm joined by political commentator Benedict Spence. Benedict, great to have you with us this morning. Big political news story today.
Yeah, strangely enough, we've all been slightly distracted by the football and everything else, but we are about to have a new Prime Minister. It may have escaped some people's notice, but that's going to happen. And slowly but surely, we're starting to get some scrutiny over new policies, some idea of what his new front bench is going to look like, and the inevitable warning that comes with the new Labour Prime Minister, which is somebody wagging their finger saying, now, don't spend too much money, the economy can't take it. And the front page of the Telegraph has the IMF telling us, indeed, that there are some spending issues at the core of our economy. And basically what they're saying is, of course, you know, they're the ones that, you know, listen, they're not the elected government, they're not elected by the people, but still they are the ones that fear people coming cap in hand saying, we've spent too much money, please lend us some. They're the ones turning around and now saying, well, listen, your economy's not in the best shape. You maybe need to cut some spending rather than just go straight for the tax rises and the spending. But Andy Burnham has already said, well, it's his own words, he's going to go back to being Labour. And that does mean he wants to increase some taxes to increase some spending. The IMF has said that they understand that there are some things Britain needs to spend more money on, defence in particular, that big one.
Yeah.
But elsewhere, you know, it's not exactly a secret. The size of the welfare bill in this country is large and it is growing. There are serious concerns, actually, about where money is meant to come from. Burnham has said, his own words again, that he may need to ask the public for a little bit more. He's not really asking, he's just going to tell people that their taxes are going to go up. And then the question will come, where is your mandate for that? Which I think is not an unfair question to ask, because people already feel very highly taxed. So already, not all is well, even though we were expecting maybe a bit of a Burnham bounce. That's not materialised, and this, I think, is not going to make things more comfortable for him.
And of course, the IMF have issued this warning. It's really interesting how the markets are reacting so far, because it seems like the pound seems to be growing. GDP has only grown about 0.01%.
Yeah.
The markets are fairly level and calm right now, aren't they? But there is a big question over who is going to be Chancellor. And what do you make of those who are the kind of front runners at the moment? You've got Shabana Mahmood, talks of Ed Miliband, not sure if he's still a front runner. Yvette Cooper is in the mix as well. Yeah,
it's a tricky one. This is on the front page of the Times, actually, that Shabana Mahmood's prospective appointment could cause some rumblings within the party, that a lot of Andy Burnham supporters who tend to be further to the left of the party, they're not happy. They would prefer it to be Ed Miliband. But it's interesting that you say that, you know, the markets do not appear yet to have been too massively spooked, and one suspects that's partly because Andy Burnham hasn't come out and said, yes, it's going to be Ed Miliband, taxes, baby, they're going to rise and we're going to increase the spending. There is a sense that Mahmood is going to be slightly more hesitant, perhaps slightly more sensible, that she wouldn't deviate as much from what Rachel Reeves has already done. But there are question marks over Shabana Mahmood as well. She's not, you know, a trained economist in the same way that Rachel Reeves was. She doesn't have that kind of experience. But, you know, that's the difficult balancing act that he needs to strike. In of itself, it's concerning that he didn't already have a team in place ready to go. One would say he's been ready for this job, he's been telling us for some time. Why wasn't that the case? But I think you can understand why, given the impact that the markets have had over previous Prime Ministers, Liz Truss, you know, he would be a little bit hesitant about wanting to spook the horses, so you can see why.
And it is such a crucial position for any PM, isn't it, who is going to be the Chancellor. Let's go to our next story. So this is The Times. Burnham set for left-wing revolt over Mahmood. So basically what we've been talking about. But the other point also is about Ed Miliband. I mean, people were a bit spooked about him too, weren't they, with his kind of doubling down on his net zero policies. So...
Well, this is, in The Times, it also talks about how a lot of Burnham's allies, and they always talk about, Burnham's allies, these are just people on the left of the party that a journalist has gone to and said, what do you think? But their fear is that Mahmood will be divisive in some way. And, talking about, say, immigration policies, we all know that that's a very contentious issue, but that's one of the fears that they say they have, that she would be divisive. But that is sort of setting it up as Miliband would be less divisive. I'm not sure that that is the case. I think that he's actually quite a polarising figure. Also, he comes with the stigma of having stood to be Prime Minister before on a manifesto of his own and been soundly rejected by the public. I don't think that necessarily is the sort of thing that people look to and go, ah, yes, unifying. I would also say there are certain parts of the country that would have tended to vote Labour that now are maybe tending more towards the Green Party, strangely enough, because of, ironically, his attitude towards specific net zero policies. And in particular, I'm thinking about solar panels here, which is that, if you turn around and you say to people, well, we're going to be environmentally happy and healthy and all that sort of thing, and, oh, by the way, I'm going to rip up great swathes of the countryside and cover that with solar panels so that people in London can have electricity that's green. That doesn't go down particularly well in rural, left-leaning communities. But that's what's happened in the east of England under Ed Miliband.
And it's not really something that you would expect Andy Burnham to be backing either, because he's very much saying he wants every postcode in the country to see growth. The other point about, Shabana Mahmood in this, that she might be divisive, is that others are saying in other papers that actually, because she has overlooked security and immigration, she may be good for defence and bolstering defence.
Yeah, and we can't get away from that ultimately. I know that it's something that a lot of Labour MPs feel very sort of uncomfortable about, but defence is the first priority of any government, and that is something that both Labour and Conservatives have lost sight of over the last couple of years. Going back to that first story, the IMF have made it very clear, look, we understand you need to spend more money on this sort of thing because all of your allies are telling you you need to. So, if you are able to put somebody in place who is able to also assuage the fears of your NATO allies at a time when the United States is going, maybe we fund defence in Europe, maybe we don't, that's going to be important. But also, as I say, things like welfare, how does he square that circle? I think that's a really difficult thing, especially for a Labour government to do.
We obviously have the speech coming at midday. Any idea what you think he might say in this?
I am not actually prepared to gamble and say that he would say anything of note, simply because we've already had him giving the example of a speech where he didn't really say very much other than it's all going to be sunshine and rainbows and I'm going to make it all better. No questions, please. And that was the end of it. And this is a real issue that I have, again, with the whole idea of the incoming Burnham administration. There has been a real lack of scrutiny, in part because he's not putting out very much that's solid, and because he's severely limiting access to certain members of the press to actually scrutinise him in the first place. Now, he's been able to get away with this because of the whole Nigel Farage furore on the side. He's not going to be able to do this long-term, though. I mean, it's not like the last general election where Keir Starmer was able to get away with slightly less scrutiny because it was more fun to bash the Tories. This time, it's just him. That's all there is to it.
Well, we will see what he has to say at midday, where we'll be bringing you that speech live. Thank you so much, Benedict, for your time today. Coming up next, we'll bring you Beth Rigby's full interview with Keir Starmer. Stay with us. You're watching Sky News.
Opening hours of the war on Iran, a primary school was hit by a missile designed to blow up military bunkers.
What I've seen, that was done by Iran.
We've been investigating.
Can you explain why you cannot reveal what happened in Minab?
Denial, denial.
And we've travelled to Minab.
Grave after grave. It's overwhelming.
To gather evidence and talk to victims.
I just have question why.
An interview that lasted nearly 5 minutes. We talked about Prime Minister Starmer. We talked about the special relationship with who he said. It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
Everything in America feels kind of torn in two right now, and it has been an intense few weeks for Minneapolis.
How many more people have to die?
This is not America.
A large and growing protest movement. They're vocal and they're angry.
Are these immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
We just arrived in Doha, just ahead of President Trump, and look at that. The horse-backed military and beyond them, the skyline of a city transformed.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
What do America's Christian faithful make of the president's pop at the Pope?
The ones that vote for him are going to vote for him through thick and thin.
Before anybody criticizes the Pope, they need to think more than twice.
Mark Stone from Sky News. Will you stop buying Russian energy? Is there any assurance for Palestinian self-determination? Of course. It's a big shift by President Trump.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's a big shift. It's very positive.
Sky News, the full story first.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Today looks mainly dry and very warm, locally hot, but heatwave conditions will become largely confined to the southwest this weekend. It's mostly warm and dry out there now, but misty low cloud over northern and eastern parts will bring the risk of drizzle. That cloud will mostly clear to coastal regions this morning to leave plenty of sunshine, but northeast England and northern Scotland look slow to brighten.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Sir Keir Starmer has defended his record as Prime Minister in his last TV interview before he leaves Downing Street on Monday. This lunchtime, Andy Burnham will be officially announced as leader of the Labour Party. We'll be bringing you his speech live on Sky News. Speaking to our political editor Beth Rigby on his final trip to Kyiv, the PM said that he thought that Ukraine would win the war and claimed that he was leaving the top job with pride. Here's her full interview.
Prime Minister, you're here in Ukraine today. This is your last big act as Prime Minister. What's your message to President Zelensky as you prepare to stand down?
My message to President Zelensky is one I delivered at the press conference, but I'd also delivered privately to him, and that is that the UK commitment to Ukraine will not waver. We will be there for as long as it takes and a long time afterwards. And it was really important as I stepped down that I told that to President Zelensky, and I wouldn't have said it publicly if I hadn't had the opportunity to talk it through with him privately. And I'm absolutely confident that the UK support will not waver, and he really needs to have that reassurance because, of course, the relationship between the UK and Ukraine has been very strong since the outbreak of the conflict. It's been particularly strong in the last 2 years, and I have got to know him. We've had a personal friendship, a very closeness in terms of his thinking, how he's approaching the conflict, the decisions he takes. And I wanted to and did give him that reassurance.
Because he said in the press conference, didn't he? He said, I'm afraid of the change.
I think what he means by that is there's a degree of uncertainty, but he needn't be. I really am clear about that. I wouldn't have given that reassurance if I wasn't absolutely sure in my own mind. This is far too serious for that. And therefore, I'm absolutely clear the relationship between the UK and Ukraine will not waver in any way whatsoever.
So, PM, you've always said recently that you will not offer advice to your successor.
No.
But you are sending a message to your successor here.
No, I'm not. No, I think that the UK support for Ukraine is deep in the psyche of the British public.
Yeah.
If you go around the country, we've got Ukrainian flags on churches, on town halls, in people's gardens. These are voluntary acts by the British people. We've managed to achieve unity across the House of Commons from the start of the conflict, and therefore I have no doubt about the future. And this isn't, I'm not in the business of sending advice or messages to my successor. I will give him my full support.
But have you had assurances from him?
Well, I would not have said what I said to President Zelensky, which is really important, if I wasn't confident about what I was saying. And that is really important. I'm not somebody else's spokesperson. I'm not telling somebody else what to do or offering advice. But this conflict is serious.
Yeah.
This is about values of democracy and freedom, values that are really important to the British. And I would not have given the assurance I did give if I wasn't 100% confident about it.
OK. And you also said something you haven't said before today. You said you now believe Ukraine can win this war. You haven't said that before.
I believe Ukraine will win this war. I think that the last 6 months have been a real turning point because at the beginning of the conflict, everybody assumed that Russia would win within a matter of weeks. We are now in year 5, and what has happened in that time is Ukraine has begun to push back on the front this year. Medium-range and long-range missiles have been used to great effect. The economic sanctions have had real damage to the Russian economy, the work that's been done on the shadow fleet. But the other reason I think we sometimes miss this is that one of the consequences of 4.5 years of conflict here in Ukraine is they now have one of the most effective, efficient military forces anywhere in Europe. They're tech savvy, they've got incredible skills on the front line. Their drone warfare has gone from, I remember the early days seeing their capability to now world-leading capability. And what they've shown is that it's not just the size of your army, it's how you fight a modern conflict. And so they are probably the most effective fighting machine in Europe.
Yeah,
that is what 4.5 years. So they will win this conflict. They will get the justice.
When will they win this conflict?
Well, I don't think anybody can put a date on that, but it's significant that this year the mood has changed in Moscow, actually across Europe. One of the reasons I genuinely believe that we've had such strong statements coming out of the G7 meeting, the global leaders meeting a few weeks ago, and out of NATO more recently, is because across the world people are beginning to appreciate that actually the tide is turning and Ukraine will win this conflict, and quite right too.
PM, you spent a lot of time on foreign affairs. You care deeply, clearly, about Ukraine. You've worked very hard with Zelensky and Macron. You're clearly leaving office before you are ready. You would not have chosen to go now. Why have your MPs rejected you after such a short time? Well,
the way I look at this is not just the 2 years we've had in government, but the 6.5 years that I've been on the front line. I took over the leadership of the Labour Party early in 2020. We had just lost the 2019 election. That was the worst election result for the Labour Party since 1935, and most people thought the Labour Party is finished, it'll never win again. And even those that were a bit more optimistic said, if they do win again, it'll take 10 years. I'd never believed that. I turned it around. We ripped out anti-Semitism. We forced the party to face the country. And we began to make real progress. Begrudgingly, people said, well, you might win, but it'll be a coalition because you won't get a majority, and we got a landslide victory. So for the parliamentary party, the question, who was the right person to save our party, to take it to victory in a general election and the second biggest majority ever of a Labour government, That's answered. I've answered that question. They're now asking the question, who's best to take us into 2029? Yeah. They've given the answer to that question.
Do you agree with the answer?
I accept it. I accept it.
That's a different answer to
I accept it, but I accept it, and this is really important, with good grace.
Yeah, I said that.
And therefore, from the moment I took the final decision, I have not only done it in good grace, I've done it trying to ensure that there's an orderly transition and that my successor can succeed. And I believe that to be true. I think we've built strong foundations, a stable economy, which it's impossible to imagine that we've done in 2 years, much stronger public services, huge measures on child poverty. We'll do more on child poverty than any government, including a Labour government. We've done more on defence and security. We've enhanced our international reputation. Now that is a sound foundation to go on and win in 2029. And amongst the reasons that I accept the decision of my parliamentary colleagues, I'm going in good grace and want to support what comes next is I believe in my country, I want my country to thrive. And in the end, I've said in many interviews with you, country first, and I mean it and I'm going to live it.
Do you think if you'd stayed on, you could have won the next election? Labour could have won with you as the leader?
I've always believed we would win the next election, but the decision about who's best placed to take us into 2029 is a decision the Parliamentary Party has taken. I accept it in good grace. And I look on the 6.5 years to have taken my party from near oblivion to the second biggest landslide victory and to have built 2 years solid foundations for our country and to leave the country in a better state than I found it. I'm proud of that, and I will now happily spend more time with Vic and the kids. I leave probably the most high-profile job in the country. It's the most important, which is to be the best dad I can to my kids, the best husband I can to my wife, and I'm looking forward to that.
I want to ask you about Vic and the kids in a moment, but Morgan McSweeney, your former Chief of Staff and your campaign manager who helped win that landslide, he said that we didn't prepare enough for office. Do you agree with that?
I agree with Morgan on many things, but not that.
OK.
And if you look at what's happened in the 2 years, the economy was broken when we inherited it. It is now stable. Even the figures that have come out today on growth are better than expected. We've got the best growth in the G7, and we've stabilised the economy, even though we've got the conflict in Iran going on. Our NHS has got the fastest drop in waiting lists for 17 years. Child poverty will be on record numbers that we're lifting out of poverty. And internationally, nobody could argue that we're not in a better place. And therefore, that's not just a plan, that is a plan being implemented. None of these things fall from the sky.
When I hear you talking about your achievements as a Labour leader and then Prime Minister, it must hurt to have to leave.
Look, it's a very difficult decision to decide to end your political career. Of course it is, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend otherwise. And what I've had to grapple with is the question, what is the answer of my parliamentary colleagues to the question about 2029, and accept that. What is the best thing for the country? What is the best thing for the government? And then the intensely personal, which is, am I going to end my political career? That, in the end, becomes something which, for all the discussions with parliamentary colleagues, teams in Number 10, my parliamentary and political team, in the end, for me, it may be different for other people. It boiled down to a deeply, deeply personal decision. Am I prepared to end my political career? And I've answered that question. I answered it having spent the weekend with Vic and the kids, and only the Vic and the kids.
But you said to me a year ago, we were doing another interview ahead of elections, and I was asking you about Nigel Farage, and I asked, how would you feel if he beat you? And you said, I hate the thought of losing to anyone,
Yep.
I mean, your own side, your opponents. It's hard for you.
It is hard, of course. I mean, I do hate any time when we don't win, but it's very important to look at the last 6.5 years as a big win, because taking the party from near oblivion, possibly never winning again, to winning a landslide victory and then putting in place the foundations of a better country, leaving the country better than you found it, which is the test of any Prime Minister. I'm proud of that. That is a win. I will now go on and spend time with Vic and the kids, and that's really important to me.
I want to come to this because in June at the G7, you were so clear to me. You said, I'm not going to walk away, I'm going to fight. And then less than a week later, you announced that you were going to stand down. I really believed you at the G7 that that's how you felt. So what changed in those few days?
I had to reflect on the answer my parliamentary colleagues have given on the question about who should lead us into 2029. And I felt that it was right to apply the same principles I've always applied, which is what is in the best interest of the country. How do I ensure that we don't implode into some massive fight in government? And how do I do my bit to ensure that the solid foundation that we have built continues as the basis for that 2029 win by the Labour Party, which I believe it can be.
So you sort of almost had to put your own ego aside a bit in that moment?
I think it was very... I've always said country first, and I've always meant country first, and that means, in the end, I felt I had to take the decision what was in the best interest of the country. And I don't... and I do that with good grace because that is what I've lived by, that is the right thing to do. But it is also, Beth, something intensely personal in the end because it is a decision to end your political career, and I just needed the space to really think that through. And there's been a lot of noise around me, a lot of people having a lot of conversations.
It must have been intense.
I needed just to be on my own with Vic in particular, our kids as well, and they were the only people I was with that weekend. I didn't speak to anybody else pretty much that weekend.
I was trying to phone everyone and no one had spoken to you.
And in the end, it came down to me and my family making decisions.
Can I ask you, what did Vic say to you? Because what did Vic think?
Well, I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of what Vic said, but I can tell you this. Through every step, she's been with me.
Yeah.
The good, the bad, the challenging, the great moments, the victory nights, the really low moments when somebody tried to burn our house down, our family house, when my brother died. The last few months, which have not been easy, but she's been there at my side every step of the way. And so that's why we had to take the decision together. And that's the way we will always be. And I do realise how lucky I am to have such a rock. Because there are lots of highs in politics, there are a number of lows, and to have someone by your side who is 100% part of an inseparable team is remarkable. And so, of course, I was going to talk it through with Vic, talk about the pros, the cons, how it left us as a family. But also, I do have to reflect on the fact that 6.5 years on the front line impacts on your family. I've tried so hard for it not to. We've protected the kids. I've tried to make time for them. But there's no pretending that there haven't been, I don't know how many times when I've said, we can't do that, I'm sorry, I've got to do this, or
did the kids want you back? Did the kids want you to come back in that way? They want you to stand down?
Did. No, I don't think they wanted me to stand down, but they wanted me to spend more time with them. But they always have. And I'm always conscious that it's their time that often is given up, and now I can spend more time with them, which is fantastic.
It's also quite an achievement as a parent if your teenagers actually want to spend time with you.
Well, yes,
congratulations.
we're still in that space at the moment, but...
I mean, I was going to say, you tweeted on Father's Day, and this was the day before you resigned, being a dad is my greatest joy. Today I'm thinking about my dad and the father I am to my children because of him. Happy Father's Day. And then you spoke about the kids again at your resignation speech. You said being the Prime Minister is the biggest job, but being the father is the most important job. So that came into the decision-making for you.
I can't... This is part of who I am. They're my pride and my joy. Every day I take pride in them, every little thing they do. It's an unconditional love for my children. And of all the things I've done in my life, having our 2 children is by far the best thing. It's been a joint project of me and Vic from the very start. When they were born, we looked at each other and said, what do we want for our children? And we decided we wanted happy and confident. And that is all we've set out to achieve with them, that they're happy and confident. And every time I look at them, it gives me such a sort of well of feeling inside. And so to be able to spend a bit more time with them now is a great step forward.
And PM, you're here securing your legacy. How would you like to be remembered?
I mean, in a sense, that'll be for others to decide. But as the person that saved the Labour Party, turned it into a party that could face the public again. And we were a party that were found to be institutionally anti-Semitic, that was not fit, actually, to face the country and the electorate. And we turned that around. And we did that in a relatively short period of time. It was 4.25 years from me taking over as leader of the Labour Party to walking into Downing Street with a landslide majority. That is hard, bloody work. You know, forcing a party to change at pace, to win an election, and then to, in 2 years, to have stabilised the country, to leave it in a better state. And on the international stage, I do think, and you'll have observed yourself at international meetings and gatherings, we have transformed the standing of the United Kingdom, the personal relationships with international leaders, the trust that is now put in the UK, and the sense that when other countries are looking for leadership, they're looking to the UK again. And I'm really proud of that, because I've always felt the UK had a huge amount to offer on the international stage. We're pragmatists, we're leaders, we're able to bridge and bring together. We'd lost that in the last decade. And we've got it back. We've got our mojo back as a country.
And when you walk out of the door for the final time on Monday, how do you think you're going to feel? Is it going to be relief, pride, sadness, a big cocktail of emotion?
Pride, big pride in everything that I've achieved. When I came into politics in 2015, I didn't think I'd be leader of the Labour Party. I didn't think I'd be Prime Minister. That has never been my lifelong ambition. I thought with a bit of luck, Will, when in 2015, I might become Attorney General one day. So this wasn't a great project, but in 2019, it was obvious to me that our party was on the brink, and that somebody had to step up as a sense of duty to the party and to the country. Actually, you need a good, strong Labour Party for the country to function properly. So I stepped up into that space, and having stepped up, I thought, well, I'm not just going to stay here. I'm going to go on, and I'm going to win the election. And I never had any doubt in my mind about that. Everybody along the way said, it's not going to happen, you're not going to do it, it's not possible. And every time I said, it is, you watch, we would. And we did, and we won a general election, and I'm very proud of that. So I shall walk out with pride, and I shall walk out looking forward to the next chapter, which is spending time with Vic and the kids, being, as I say, the best husband I can to my wife, who has stuck with me and been with me every step of the way, and it's impacted her hugely, and the best dad I can be to my kids. What a wonderful thing to look forward to.
What, hanging out with teenagers? I mean...
Yes.
I mean, yeah, no, it is.
You know, look,
it's not... I think it's lovely your kids want to spend time with you.
My son is a fantastic young man, just turned 18, and we do a lot of things together. My daughter is a beautiful 15-year-old, going on 19, who has got her dad absolutely wound round her little finger.
Your dad didn't really tell you he loved you much. You know, it's been widely written about, and you really do want to publicly talk about your kids in that way. Is that really important to you because you didn't have it?
I was determined to be a different dad than my dad was. It was a generational thing. It was different in those days. He saw his job as going out, earning the money. But also, my mum was so very ill all of her life that she needed my dad to provide so much to her, and he did. And he gave her such sort of unconditional love and support that I don't think he had space, emotional space, for us in the way that he might otherwise have had. We didn't hug, we didn't have the sort of relationship, but I was determined to do it differently with my children. And we have done it differently, and it gives me great joy.
Well, it's good to know that actually after what's been quite a rough few months that you are very optimistic actually about walking out of the door.
I go with pride. I go knowing that I leave the country in a better state than I found it, and I go knowing I've left the foundation for Labour to win the next general election.
Yeah.
And I go out and I will immediately that afternoon spend time with Vic and the kids, and I look forward to that.
So my final question is, as you hand on the baton, you believe that you set Andy Burnham up to win the next general election, and part of the next phase of this administration's success is your success?
I hope so. We've built the foundation for this now, and Labour can go on and win that election. I think we'll go on and win that election. I'm proud to hand over the party in good shape to Andy Burnham, hand over the country in good shape to Andy Burnham. I will support him all the way. I'll give advice if it's asked for, and I'll give it privately. I will not give advice if it's not asked for, and I certainly won't give it publicly. I will give my full support, and that is what I mean. I want my country to thrive, and I'm sure it'll be a great success going forward.
OK, Prime Minister, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
Hello and a very good morning. It's 7 o'clock. This is Mornings with Jones and Melbourne. I'm Anna.
And I'm Kamali. Thanks for starting your day with us. Here's how we're looking.
Andy Burnham becomes Labour leader today with a set-piece lunchtime speech. Pressure now on to pick the right Chancellor.
Meanwhile, his predecessor has given his final interview, insisting he left the country better than he found it.
President Trump accuses China of committing 2020 election fraud and orders an FBI investigation. His conclusions have been met with a high degree of scepticism by experts.
Also coming up this hour, we're going to speak to the leader of the Green Party, Zach Polansky, joining us about 7:30.
Multiple experts tell a Sky News investigation all the evidence points towards the US being responsible for a deadly attack on an Iranian primary school. Hello, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us here today. So, after an unchallenged run, Andy Burnham becomes Labour leader today. And he begins with a set-piece speech this lunchtime, which we will, of course, bring you live here on Sky News. His promise that he'll make the party unashamedly Labour. Well, we're still waiting on his first major decision, though, and that is who's going to be his Chancellor.
Yeah, the big question is there. Now, there are a few people who are in the frame. Shabana Mahmood is currently the favourite to take over, although reports suggest she will be keen to stay on at the Home Office as Home Secretary. Ed Miliband is being pushed by many. He worked in the Treasury under Gordon Brown and would likely receive some backing from the left of the party. Another potential, Yvette Cooper, current Foreign Secretary, who has many years of experience in government. Let's bring our political correspondent Lucy McDade for a bit more on this. Lucy,
good morning.
Morning to you. So we're almost at the end of the speculation zone, aren't we? We can start actually knowing what he's going to do.
I don't know, though, actually, because, you know, MPs have now left for the summer, effectively. We go into parliamentary recess. So it depends what Andy Burnham does over the summer. Today, we will hear him speak because he's crowned Labour leader. Monday is when he will become officially Prime Minister. Unlike previously, we haven't seen a contest. 379 Labour MPs have put their support behind him. He will talk a little bit about his plan for the country, if you like. But a lot of it we've heard before. He's going to say about how he wants Labour under his leadership to be authentically Labour. He wants the party to be more united, no more internal divisions. Well, we'll see if that actually plays out in future, won't we? And he'll talk about wanting to be a leader for everywhere in the country, the North, South, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and bringing growth to every postcode. This is the idea that he will bring Manchesterism and roll it out right across the country, give local areas more powers over things like housing and transport. In truth, as I was saying, we've heard a lot of it before. Whether over the next few weeks he will kind of drop more concrete policy ideas, well, we'll find out.
Yeah, and the suggestion is that he might try and do that kind of New Labour thing in 1997 where they peppered the public with announcements.
Yeah, because also we've been living in a bit of a vacuum over the past few weeks, and that goes to what Kamali was saying about this speculation. You know, when we don't have these clear kind of policy announcements coming from the person, this is where you get all that speculation. What's he going to do about taxes? What is he going to do about the NHS? Who's he going to appoint into these top jobs? We are getting more of those announcements from Andy Burnham. He's appointed a number of people into his number 10 team, so those people behind the doors who make some of the decisions, help him kind of drive this strategy. But unless he does make some announcements over the summer, like you say, it depends what happens. We'll get a lot more speculation.
Indeed. All right, well, Lucy, stay with us because as Burnham arrives, his predecessor has given his final interview as PM.
Yeah, speaking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, Sir Keir Starmer insisted that he leaves the country in a better position than he found it.
It's good to know that actually after what's been quite a rough few months that you are very optimistic actually about walking out of the door.
I go with pride. I go knowing that I leave the country in a better state than I found it, and I go knowing I've left the foundation for Labour to win the next general election.
Yeah.
And I go out and I will immediately that afternoon spend time with Vic and the kids. And I look forward to that.
As you hand on the baton, you believe that you set Andy Burnham up to win the next general election, and part of the next phase of this administration's success is your success?
I hope so. We've built the foundation for this now, and Labour can go on and win that election. I think we'll go on and win that election. I'm proud to hand over the party in good shape to Andy Burnham, hand over the country in good shape to Andy Burnham. I will support him all the way. I'll give advice if it's asked for, and I'll give it privately. I will not give advice if it's not asked for, and I certainly won't give it publicly. I will give my full support, and that is what I mean. I want my country to thrive, and I'm sure it'll be a great success going forward.
Yeah, and it was quite a touching interview in some ways, the way he talked about spending more time with his family and how he was looking forward to that, but also very keen to protect his legacy.
Yeah, and it's absolutely no coincidence that Keir Starmer chose to spend his last few days as Prime Minister in Ukraine and give that interview from there, because it's on the international stage where I think Keir Starmer, many people have said, haven't they, that it's where he's been most comfortable. But also, I think even some of the Prime Minister's critics would say that it's on the world stage that he's done some of his most successful work. You know, it hasn't been an easy job. He talks about how he led that coalition of the willing, which was this kind of group of nations all rallying around Ukraine. And you look at the support that they have continued to provide. There was also one kind of achievement of his, perhaps, is when Donald Trump had that spat with President Zelensky in the White House. If you remember that, you know, the first thing that Keir Starmer did was get Zelensky on a plane to Downing Street. And actually, I think it's when you look back on it, you realise what the significance of that moment was. That was Keir Starmer standing up to Donald Trump, really. So that is significant. But he does actually look like the man with the weight of the world off his shoulders.
He looks so relaxed. Even his voice has changed.
Yeah, and I think it's easy for people to say, why didn't we see this Keir Starmer before? But I suppose the truth is, when you know that you are leaving a role, you are automatically probably a lot more relaxed. So he spoke quite honestly about how he was deeply affected by those arson attacks on his family home, about the challenges that he's faced, how his wife has supported him through those, and ultimately looking forward now to spending more time with his family. People like to see politicians in that space, don't they, being a little bit more honest.
A bit more personal, maybe.
Yeah, maybe a bit too late for Keir Starmer.
Yes.
But yeah.
Fascinating to see what he does next as well. And Lucy, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. So, yeah, fascinating today. We're going to hear from Andy Burnham when he makes that speech, as he is officially pronounced Labour leader at this conference today. So it'll be interesting to see the messages he's putting over there. But I think that he'll mostly be speaking to the Labour Party then, won't he?
He will.
And perhaps on Monday, when he becomes Prime Minister, there's going to be more of a sense of talking to the country.
Absolutely, and a country that's wanting to hear what he has planned. And I believe that over the summer he has sort of a tour of the country set up where he'll be going out and speaking to voters and activists and trying to make sure that when he starts his job properly in September, he's hit the ground running.
Exactly.
We'll see.
Lots of questions we shall see. Now then, 7 independent experts have concluded that all the evidence points towards the US being responsible for a deadly attack on an Iranian primary school.
Yeah, their comments contradict Donald Trump's repeated claims that the US might not be behind the bombing, which occurred on the first day of the war.
Well, they were responding to a major Sky News investigation into the bombing, which also found that precision weapons were used, as our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire reports.
There is no doubt that this was a school and that 120 children were killed when the missiles hit Minab. But ever since the strike on the very first day of the war, the US has produced conflicting claims at the highest levels about why it was hit and who hit it.
It's horrible what happened, but there were missiles flying all over the place, and somebody said it was our missile. Well, maybe it wasn't our missile, but I've seen nothing to lead me to believe it was. If you come up with the right answer, I don't think it's going to be us.
Well, we can give an answer, and our investigation shows that this wasn't just missiles flying around. This was a precision strike. All the evidence points to US responsibility. 7 independent experts agreed with that conclusion. We spent months combing through footage and satellite imagery to understand the layout of the school. We then worked with research agency Forensic Architecture to rebuild the school virtually, using frames from the videos we found to create a photorealistic 3D layout. We combined that with post-strike footage to show where the missile hit. Here you can see the crater it left, the yellow circle, right in the middle of the school. This is the assembly hall, and it's where witnesses have told us teachers gather children for their safety after they heard the news that the war had started. That precision strike is exactly how the US carries out attacks.
Well, I can tell you that looking at that post-strike imagery, I knew right off the bat that this was either a US or Israeli strike. You had points of impact that were near dead center in each of these, 7 to 9 buildings that were hit, including the school. This is our common technique, at least for buildings of that size, where you can penetrate through to the center of that building, have ammunition that will be contained, where the blast will be contained inside that building.
If it was just the school that had been hit, it might be possible to blame an errant missile. But this was a pattern for the wider complex in Menab, including other civilian buildings.
Sky's Data and Forensics Unit has investigated the site. This is that complex that lay next to but separate from the school. It was associated with an Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps missile brigade. Experts told us it was likely administrative in nature.
We can reveal that at least 9 of the sites were used by civilians. 5 of them were hit, all right in the centre. This was a clinic and pharmacy, also made public on Instagram and widely reported in local media. It was a well-known landmark in Menab, administered by the IRGC, but used by the public. This was a cultural centre. You can see on satellite imagery that both buildings were levelled. The school children often visited the auditorium inside. Several of the children you see in this video were killed in the strike on the school. Each yellow dot represents a missile strike on the complex. You can see the clear pattern of attack. Tomahawk missiles were used in the strike, and the US is the only belligerent in this war that has them. We also know that 1 US carrier strike group was in range of Menab. 3 of the ships are Tomahawk capable, and footage publicised by the US shows the USS Spruance firing them towards Iran on the day of the attack. This is all information that is publicly available, even if it took us some digging. The US military has far more resources and a strong moral imperative to identify whether a target is used by civilians. Whatever calculations were made, they went ahead with the strike. And that decision killed scores of children.
Fascinating documentary that you can watch if you scan the QR code. Tom is here, as you can see. And Tom, we've actually had a little bit of a development in that our US correspondent Mark Stone was able to ask Caroline Levitt, the White House press secretary, a question about this documentary just last night.
Yeah, and we got more or less the same response we've had the entire time, saying, wait for the report, go ask the Department of War, otherwise known as Department of Defence. So we haven't got any further than that. But what this documentary, what this investigation really lays out is everything you can really know up to that. This is something the data and forensics team has been looking at since the day of the strike. That's been led by Ben and Anwar, who have mapped this whole site. You saw some of that work in there. We've been looking at that from everything you can see from open source imagery. Don Waghorn, our international affairs editor, went there. There is now this a documentary I'd really urge everyone to watch. It shows exactly what we can and can't know. The bits we can't know are what the US military knows, and that's still waiting for that report to be published. And it's worth saying again, when things like this have happened previously in sort of US military history, there have been quick reports, and it's sort of accepted that in war there will be civilian casualties. That's part of it. No one is suggesting this was targeting a school because it was a school. But we haven't had that transparency that I think US military insiders were hopeful. People we've spoken to, they were sort of adamant early on that of course there's going to be a full investigation, of course there's going to be an accountability. I think they'll be very disappointed that hasn't happened yet, despite these findings, the findings we're making public, really pointing in one way. We still haven't had that acknowledgement from the US.
Yeah, and the complication, as you make out in the report as well, the repeated denials from President Trump that the US had anything to do with it. Talk to us about the report. We're seeing some more of it there, Tom, while you were talking. That forensic work that is done on the school is fascinating and really the key to how you've been able to come to the conclusions that you've come to.
Yeah, and this all started with Ben and Anwar looking especially at the victims, trying to identify how many children died, because, that was a source of some controversy to start with. So that means finding out who they were. And as a result of that, and remember, this is when the internet was shut down in Iran because of the protests initially, but then because of the war. They found this amazing sort of archive of school footage, so normal life within the school. Just something, any school in the world might do. Pictures of the kids having, these days out, auditoriums, or just sort of lessons, or giving recitals, singing songs about their mum, things like that. It was this amazing archive, and what that meant is that you could go and recreate the school in 3D, understand it. So that wasn't just a sort of academic exercise to sort of, here's a nice 3D model. That's about saying, this was a school. There weren't any secret rooms here. This wasn't about ammunition storage. Just trying to be really, really clear about what this school was, what it was used for. It was a school. It was separated from the rest of this IRGC complex, even though that complex associated with Missile Brigade, it was used by civilians. So as a result of that, we're really able to build the school up and then understand why that strike was so deadly too. So one of those you can see on there, you can see where the missile strikes laid over. It is right in the middle. That points to a precision strike, and also right in the assembly hall. That's where kids would gather. We've got loads of videos from that. You can see them giving those recitals. They would have been in classrooms nearby. They would have been scared as well because war had broken out. Their parents were being called to come and pick them up. So by recreating that, by that forensic investigation, we are able to understand as much as we can what happened that day. There are still questions to be answered. I don't think we really can go any further than we have without a government sort of saying what happened.
Tom, thanks very much indeed. And as we say, we urge people to scan the QR code and watch that documentary. Thanks very much indeed.
Tom and team for all that work. Now, staying with the US, and President Trump has accused China of committing election fraud in 2020. The president used an address to the nation last night to say that China wanted him to lose the election despite an assessment from US intelligence that found no evidence of foreign interference. Here's what Trump had to say.
Over a period of years, starting during the 2020 election cycle, the People's Republic of China carried out what is believed to be the largest compromise of election data in history, resulting in China's illicit acquisition of 220 million U.S. voter files. That information includes names, addresses, phone numbers, political party preferences, and other sensitive data that would be needed to register to vote and engage in other nefarious activities, which is exactly what was happening.
Well, let's get the latest then from our US correspondent, James Matthews.
It's not the first time we've heard Donald Trump question his country's election system. He has long argued that he lost the 2020 election because it was rigged, even though that is a claim that has been debunked through the years. As he spoke last night, the White House released newly declassified documents, even if they didn't necessarily back up his claims of election interference. Trump said that China had worked to undermine his first administration and his 2020 campaign. That is a claim that his own intelligence agencies dismissed at the time. He said that China had illegally acquired 220 million voter files, even though that's something that can be accessed publicly. As an address to the nation, it was very much a high-profile assault on the integrity of America's voting system by its president. Trump has an eye on November's midterm elections, and he ended his address last night by urging support for legislation that he wants to introduce, the Save America Act. That would require more stringent checks on voter eligibility. He says it's designed to prevent election fraud. His critics say he wants to restrict his opponent's vote.
Now, before Trump started speaking, a spokesperson from the Chinese embassy in Washington said that Beijing has never and will never interfere in presidential elections in the United States. The Chinese response to the evidence that was presented by President Trump last night during that speech. It met with scepticism by many, as James was laying out there.
Now then, back here, under-16s in England will be banned from buying high-caffeine energy drinks from April next year. So let's find out a little bit more. Barnaby is here. So tell us more. Presumably this is for health reasons?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, this was first proposed last year, but we now know the government wants to ban high-caffeine energy drinks to people under the age of 16 from April next year. Now, a lot of drinks contain caffeine. Coca-Cola contains caffeine, for example. This will be about caffeinated drinks with over 150 milligrams of caffeine per litre. So really it's drinks like Prime, like Monster, like Relentless. This will apply at shops, it will apply at vending machines, it will apply on online retailers, and there will be a fine of up to £2,500 for any retailer who is found to break the law. Now, the reason they're bringing this in is the government have done a consultation, and education ministers and health ministers believe that high caffeinated drinks affect sleep, affect anxiety, and affect concentration at school. One thing I found quite interesting is that tea and coffee is not included as part of this ban. The reason that's interesting is a cup of coffee from a takeaway can have as much caffeine as an energy drink. And if you look at the consultation, what the government are really saying is that these energy drinks are marketed differently, they can be consumed very quickly. They're basically saying they are more aimed, I think, at under 16s than, say, a takeaway coffee. So it will be in law from April 2027. If any of this sounds familiar, it's because, of course, some supermarkets have had voluntary bans since about 2018. So a lot of the major supermarkets are already doing this, but this is about those smaller retailers where kids are getting these drinks.
And Barnaby, the enforcement will be that the retailers have to ask these young people for ID, right?
Well, they'll have to be able to prove their age, exactly. So, and as I say, the penalty for not doing so is potentially quite severe, £2,500 fine, and that will be enforced by local authorities, so pretty severe consequences if the retailers aren't checking the age of these children.
And I guess just making an enforcement like this highlights to the general public what's in these drinks, I guess, and makes people a bit more aware of their decisions.
Well, absolutely, because some of these drinks actually are quite high in calories as well. And so we've seen obesity and dental health cited and some of the reasons as to why the government want to bring this in, because they want children to not be consuming drinks that are so high in calories, but also so high in sugar, because that's having an impact on their teeth. And we know at the moment that in the UK there are issues with dental provision.
Really interesting. Barnaby, thanks very much indeed.
Barnaby, thank you so much for that. Now, as we were just reporting with Tom a short time ago, an investigation by Sky News has revealed precision strikes were used in a deadly primary school attack in Iran. The painstaking search for evidence is part of a major investigation into the tragedy.
Well, let's bring in former British Ambassador to Iran, Sir Nicholas Hopton, who joins us now. Very good morning to you. And we want to talk about the current situation in Iran with US strikes continuing this week in a moment. But first, your thoughts on the delay of this investigation into this deadly school strike. What do you make of the fact that we've still not had any results?
Well, it's certainly taking a long time, and longer than would normally be the case for such an instance as this. As your documentary, and a very excellent piece of work in the circumstances, made very clear, a tragic mistake was made. The CENTCOM are doing an investigation, and that is the response your team got from the US. So it's too early to be very clear or attribute blame. However, the circumstantial evidence that the documentary showed was very clearly that the signs point to a US carrier group off the Bab el-Mandeb, within range of hitting this school, and it is quite possible that they made a mistake in their targeting. Mistakes happen in war. Innocents die in war. That is one of the tragic realities, and this war itself was a big mistake from the start. So I think we do have to wait till the CENTCOM investigation reports, but at the moment the conclusion one might draw is that this was due to a mistake in US targeting.
Mr. Nicholas, how do you reflect then, in the time that's elapsed and in light of the reports and the documentary they put together, as to how the US is seen post this event and as you point out, post the war, they're standing in the world going forward?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. This does pose a big risk to US's international reputation as a country that stands by international law, upholds it around the world, and often, well, probably always in such a circumstance as this, honesty would be the best course of action for a government to take, to put their hand up and say, we made a mistake, this wasn't deliberate, it was an error, And it's understandable, perhaps, when one realises that there was an IRGC, a Revolutionary Guard installation very near to this school. But still, it shouldn't have happened. It's led to a terrible loss of life of young school children and teachers. And I think the sooner CENTCOM report, the sooner the US it does the honest thing, the better for the US's reputation and for obviously the reputation of the West more generally.
Yeah, and in the meantime, we should remind everyone that Donald Trump has consistently said he doesn't think America was responsible for the tragedy, and we still await that investigation. But turning to the continued action in Iran, we've seen strikes throughout this week, despite a ceasefire being declared just a matter of weeks ago. What do you make of that? Where are we heading?
Well, I think this is a very dangerous moment because not only do both sides seem ready to re-escalate the conflict, not necessarily return to a full-blown war, but certainly re-escalate the conflict, but also the conflict looks like spreading. So you will have seen this week that not only the US and Iran have been attacking each other, but also that on the other side of the Arabian Peninsula, the Iranian allies, the Houthi, have started to show signs that they may be willing to do something in support of Iran by disrupting maritime traffic through the Bab el-Mandab, that very narrow choke point at the bottom of the Red Sea. Now, if they did that and effectively forced some sort of much reduced traffic, at the same time as the Strait of Hormuz has been reclosed by Iran, and obviously the US has reinstated its blockade of Iranian ports, that would be the first time both of those things have happened simultaneously. Now, it would also have implications not only for the traffic of a huge amount of cargo ships, a third of the world's cargo ships passing through the Bab el-Mandab, but it would also have huge risks for a reignition of the conflict between the Houthi in Yemen and Saudi Arabia. Again, we've seen some incidents this week, the attack on Sana'a airport, not claimed by the Saudis, I should say, but by their close allies, the government of Yemen based in the south. It's a very complex picture. And at the moment, the risk is that this will escalate, not only, again, in the Strait of Hormuz between the US and Iran, but will spread across to the other side of the Arabian Peninsula with a massive implication for the global economy.
And that use potentially by the Houthis of closing the Bab el-Mandab to shipping is part of the next level of the ratchet, isn't it, for the Iranians if they're to respond? There is reporting this morning of a senior US official saying that this can't be won by an air war from the US's point of view. They need to strangle Iran economically. I mean, where are the ratchet levels for each side? I mean, the ultimate one for the Iranians will maybe starting to hit desalination plants. Donald Trump's already threatened to hit infrastructure, bridges and power stations. Do you see this ratcheting up inevitably, or is there an off-ramp for either side?
There's nothing inevitable about any of this. This is a war of choice initiated by the US and Israel against Iran. And then Iran has obviously retaliated in its own way, which has spread chaos and disruption. Obviously, hitting targets like desalination plants or bridges is illegal under international law, under the Geneva Convention. And that takes you back to the hitting of a school at the beginning of the war, which was obviously completely illegal under international law. So I think, when you talk about the US winning this, one has to ask, what does that actually mean? Because we've heard different versions of what the US objectives are right from the start of this war. And there is an off-ramp. And the off-ramp has already been written down in that 14-point memorandum of understanding last month, agreed and signed by both sides. It's a very difficult thing to implement. It is very ambitious for the deal outlined in that memorandum of understanding in the future. It will take certainly more than the 60 days envisaged to negotiate it. But that is the off-ramp for both sides, and that would actually, if it was fully implemented, lead to a transformed Iran as well, because it would change the Iranian economy from within. It would change the way Iran is engaged by the international community and its neighbours. And over time, that would inevitably change the nature of the Islamic Republic. I would argue, not everyone would agree, it would change it for the better.
Well, Sir Nicholas Upton, always interesting to get your views on events. Thanks very much indeed for joining us today.
Thank you, Shibina. Thank you.
And we should just say that we also put the evidence in our documentary and the expert assessment to the White House, the CENTCOM, the Department of War and the Defence Intelligence Agency to respond to the allegations, and none of them would comment.
Stay with us here on Mornings. Coming up after this short break, we're going to speak to the leader of the Green Party, Zach Polanski.
Now then, time to talk to the leader of the Green Party, Zach Polanski, who's here in the studio with us. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, thanks for having me.
So, Andy Burnham is going to become Labour leader later today. Is he an improvement on Keir Starmer? Is he someone you can work with?
Well, I think that remains to be seen, and I think most people in this country are probably happy to see the back of Keir Starmer. There's a sense that this country is at breaking point. We live in rip-off Britain, where we've got this toxic combination of low wages and high bills, and something needs to change. But the change, I think, is quite obvious, and I'm not sure Andy Burnham is ready to commit to it. So I want to see him calling for things like rent controls, making sure we bring in a wealth tax, and also at a time where we have a climate crisis. We're in our third heat wave this year. There was a report out last week that said we could have seen 2,000 to 3,000 deaths in the last few months alone. It's outrageous that Andy Burnham is not ruling out new oil and gas licences. He signed a fossil fuel treaty just a few years ago, and now he's signalling to the world that we're not serious about our climate commitments.
You talk about signalling. That's the point at the moment, I guess, is that we don't actually know what his policies are. We've only got sort of fairly broad brush ideas, haven't we? But you do seem to have quite similar priorities. I mean, you mentioned wealth taxes. He's talked about wealth taxes. He's making a speech today when he's going to talk about a series of wrong turns in the 1980s, criticising how economic power was privatised. He talked about building council houses. There seems to be a lot that you would agree on.
I welcome all of this, but I think you really hit the nail on the head when you said he's speaking a lot. At the moment, we're not seeing action.
But he's not Prime Minister yet.
Exactly, so I don't want to be churlish. I want to give him a chance. But we can look at what he's voted on as an MP in the last week, and he supported Shabana Mahmood's deeply regressive immigration reforms. This is looking at saying to asylum seekers that they need to review their case every 30 months. Also, the fact that Shabana Mahmood is being floated as Chancellor. This is a politician who describes Margaret Thatcher as her political hero.
No, I think she said, well, if she said that, it was because she was the first woman Prime Minister. She said she didn't agree with her policies.
I would still question some of that kind of identity politics when actually Margaret Thatcher, I would say, has been responsible for a lot of the selling off of social housing and the right to buy. So I think we're hearing contradictory messages. But your questioning's fair. Let's see what he does as Prime Minister. And if he does bring in a wealth tax, if he does build council homes, I'll be the first to applaud that. But what we're seeing over and over again, including his appointment as Chief of Staff, James Purnell, a man who was a corporate lobbyist for private water companies, the same water companies that are pumping sewage into our rivers and charging us extra for the privilege, the person who's lobbying for those is now going to be the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister. A lot of things just aren't making sense. And I think people who are on the left or who want to see progressive politics are looking at Andy Burnham and going, this looks a lot like Keir Starmer with a different face.
Well, yes, and your party's benefited a lot from voters who were unhappy with Keir Starmer. They were disaffected with Labour and they've moved over to the Greens, and you've had a rise in membership and you had that win at Gordon and Denton. You must be worried that Andy Burnham might win some of those voters back again. Are you worried about his tanks on your lawn?
I genuinely feel the opposite, actually. There were lots of people when I was criticising Keir Starmer who said, I agree with the Green Party on almost everything, but I'm just waiting until Keir Starmer goes because I'm going to give the Labour Party one last chance to maybe finally return to their values, to present a progressive socialist government that's really going to be different. And now Andy Burnham's come along. He literally wasn't a Labour MP. They had to go outside of the current parliamentary party to go find someone who could lead them. Keir Starmer had 70 Labour MPs who are literal corporate lobbyists. Andy Burnham has those same Labour MPs. So what I think we're seeing now in Speedrun is what does a Labour government look like with supposedly their best leader? And I think we're still going to see a party where inequality gets wider, where we've seen him apologise for Labour's history in Gaza, but he's still not signalled that he's going to stop selling arms to Israel. So I think again and again we're going to hear rhetoric which is more in line with what the Green Party are saying. But why have semi-skimmed when you could come to the Green Party and actually have the full version where we're both saying and doing things, and that's actually congruent?
You've said in the past, Zach, that you're not here to work with the Labour Party, you're here to replace the Labour Party. Is that still the case with this new man in charge?
That is still the case. Now, if Andy Burnham, again, as I say, comes along and says, I'm going to put a wealth tax, a 10% tax, a 1% tax on assets of £10 million or more, or a 2% tax on £1 billion or more, I'll applaud that and I'll want to work with that. If he puts in rent controls, by the way, if we frozen rents in 2022, we'd be saving the average UK renter now £2,400 every single year, and we'd be saving the government £2 billion a year. And if you look at the profit margin of your average UK landlord, they'd still be making 4.5 times as much as the average UK business. So rent controls is a win-win all round. It's these kind of policies that are transformative, are big, bold plans, but we can't keep tinkering at the edges. We need a government that are going to do these things. If they're prepared to do these things, I'll work with them. But every signal we're seeing so far is actually they're going to be doing the opposite and more of a failed status quo.
He signalled that he's willing to work with parties. I mean, to make those arguments and to get those policies in, are you willing to have a conversation? Have you reached out to them at all? Have they reached out to you?
I did reach out during the Makerfield by-election, and actually his team didn't particularly want to meet. Now, again, I don't want to be churlish. I've bumped into Andy Burnham a couple of times, and I find him personable and friendly, and so that's a good start. And I hope we can move away from some of the toxicity that came out of Starmer's Labour government, particularly personal toxicity towards myself and to the Green Party more widely. I'd really like to move to a fresh footing where actually politicians can focus on policies rather than personalities. That all being said, that's very different to going into any formal working relationship, which I think is a long way off. We're different parties, and I think it's fine that we remain separate.
You talked about yourself there, and I wonder if I can ask you about your own personal safety in the sort of the week or so after the killing of Anne Widdecombe and the threats to politicians more broadly. Have you been concerned about your safety, and what are you doing to maintain your security?
I mean, it's never comfortable to talk about your own personal safety on TV, but you're asking me a direct question, so I'll give you a direct answer. I am concerned about my personal safety. There's been several instances in the past few months, including several arrests in relation to threats towards me. I'd also add Gawain Towler, who's one of the senior advisors to reform, not a person I agree with on almost anything. He, on another TV channel, said yesterday, other than Nigel Farage, he's worried about my safety. Now, I don't need him to worry about my safety. I need the government to worry about my safety.
And do you want them to do something?
Well, Reform were offered full state security, it turns out, and turned it down. I've been offered absolutely nothing. I do think when you're a party leader in a country, it just seems obvious that actually there should be a non-partisan approach to whether you're a party leader of the government or a party leader of an opposition party. I think you should be offered similar security arrangements.
Can I ask you a couple of questions about some of the issues that you faced over the past few months? About council tax, first of all. Now, you've been cleared by the GLA of any wrongdoing. I don't think you know how much you're going to pay back, but you said you will pay it back anyway. Is that correct? Is that the process?
Yeah, I'd say the only nuance there is I don't even know if I need to pay anything, because the council have said this is a complicated situation. Voting is an unconventional living arrangement, and actually it's unclear if I need to pay anything. What I've said repeatedly, though, is anything I'll pay every penny, obviously. And by the way, if I'm found not to owe anything, I'll still donate to charity, because obviously this has been a live conversation.
And part of your policy is to reform council tax. I mean, what would you actually do that would be different around council tax?
Well, we actually want to abolish it because it's a regressive tax in terms of, I think pretty much every political party has agreed for a long time that council tax doesn't work as a system. I want to replace it with something like a land value tax, so we're actually looking at the value of the land rather than making arbitrary decisions. I know that you're not linking these two things.
Absolutely not.
If someone is owed, if someone owes council tax, they should pay it because that's a tax at the moment. Also happens to be true, though, that we do want to abolish it.
A question on your candidates and selection. Did you know there's been some controversy surrounding some of those people that have been selected? What are you going to do to make sure that the candidates that are put forward for the Green Party are adequate and don't end up having to drop out because of social media posts?
Yeah, so at the moment, we've actually hired an independent consultant to look and review at our vetting processes. I think we can always be better at this, and I can point at other parties, but I'm not going to do that because I'm responsible for my party. So I want to make sure by the time we're at the next election or any by-elections, any candidate does fit and align with all the values of the Green Party.
And you will have seen there's some footage of some activists in Hackney throwing darts, poking holes in a picture of Andy Burnham. I mean, what did you make of seeing that footage of people who are sort of working for the Green Party, doing that sort of thing?
Well, so I condemn that stunt utterly because I condemn political violence. It's also really important to say that not a single one of them was a Green Party activist and certainly not a Green Party councillor. They weren't there when it happened. But nevertheless, political violence is political violence. I don't want to see stunts like that.
Zach Polanski, appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for coming in. Thank you.
Now then, a woman with an aggressive form of brain cancer has had to sell her house to pay for potential life-extending treatment, which isn't available on the NHS.
Yeah, let's bring in Joe Fuller now, who's joining us live. And Joe, really appreciate you making the time to speak to us today. Reading through your story, really upsetting that you had to go through this process. Take us through what you've had to do so far to try and get the treatment, and what treatment are you seeking?
I have done lots of different alternative therapies because my brain tumour is now, I've classed as having recurrent glioblastoma. So the treatment's very challenging at this stage, in the sense that I have had to see lots of alternative therapies which are not available on the NHS, unfortunately. And one of which I'm looking into is immunotherapy over in Germany. And there's two different channels there, but very, very expensive. Again, not available on NHS. There's no support from the NHS towards these treatments. So I've had the basic stuck protocol, which has not changed in 21 years, which is radiotherapy and chemotherapy. So I've done all of that. But because I had it's standard of care, so essentially it's 30 days of radiotherapy, so over 6 weeks, and then 30 days of temolizumab, TMZ, which is the basic chemotherapy that they give you. For me, that didn't work. So on my scan straight after my 6 weeks of radiotherapy, I then discovered that my brain tumour had grown quite aggressively, and my oncologist had told me that I needed to bring everything forward in my life because my prognosis was not great. So that was devastating. So then I had to start seeking lots of different alternative therapies that would work for me, which were hypothermia treatment, which is incredibly expensive. The NHS doesn't finance this or give you any money towards this. So I had to self-fund for hypothermia treatment. They're £1,000 each. And the aim of those treatments is to try and work alongside your monthly chemotherapy. And you have to have 3 treatments on alternative days. So that's £3,000 every single time, every month, not to mention train fares, you know, sort of going backwards and forwards to London, tubes, that kind of thing. I have an alternative oncologist who prescribes me repurposed medications, which are, after lots of investigations, I've done a huge amount of research on glioblastoma, all of which I've had to do myself. And they have, my repurposed medications are sort of believed, and there is some science behind this in terms of blocking pathways that feed the brain tumour, and also sort of looking at nutritional, down the nutritional route and supplements, etc., and looking at my whole metabolic sort of state of my body to try and help heal myself and defend myself from this cancer, which will inevitably kill me. And the NHS don't offer anything other than chemotherapy and radiotherapy. And if it doesn't work, then essentially it's tough. So you have no choice but to seek therapies outside of the country, which for me right now is Germany, and that's my next angle. So it's been incredibly expensive so far, and I wouldn't have been able to afford what I've afforded without selling my home. Yeah. So, you know, and that's the case for many people, unfortunately, with glioblastoma.
Yeah,
and
it must be such a tough decision to make when you're going through so much. I was just looking at what the Department of Health was saying, and they talk about their sympathies being with you, and they say that improving cancer research and care is a priority for the government, and talk about their national cancer plan and research into different scientific breakthroughs. But obviously, for the time being, that's you feel that's not helping you. Talk to us a little bit about that decision to sell your house. That must have been incredibly hard.
It was, yeah, it definitely was. It's my only asset. I've worked my whole entire life for my house and to keep my house. And technically, it's something that when you die, generally, you pass that on to your children. But I don't have that option now because I've had to save that money for me to be able to actually stay alive, because the NHS don't offer that option. So, yeah, consequently, it's been devastating. Thankfully, I've got an excellent family and a lot of good friends, and my local community have all helped me in terms of sort of my GoFundMe page. So that financed, you know, got me off my feet in terms of seeking alternative therapy. But it continues. It's not something that you can just stop and start. You have to continue with it. But yeah, so it's been very hard. It's been very difficult, and to sort of accept that my prognosis is 12 to 18 months is not good enough for me. I'm not old. I'm 50, and I don't feel that that's acceptable. And I feel that there's just not enough investment into clinical trials in the UK, into bringing the therapies that other countries offer into the UK. So therefore, we're forced to travel. So not only do you have to think about your immunotherapy treatment, you have to think about how to get there, accommodation, food, all of which you have to finance yourself. I've had endless amount of blood tests that the NHS refused to pay for, so I've had to pay for them for myself, and then pay for somebody to interpret those blood tests, just so that I can ensure that I'm taking the right supplements, I'm feeding my body the right things it needs. All of these things, as far as I'm concerned, should be offered via the NHS. They're just basic things, blood tests. You know, they're not difficult. They just go to your GP, have a blood test, and then, you know, you get the results. The nutritionists and everything in the NHS, but they don't support you. You're not given that option. So you have no choice but to fund it for yourself. And that's why I had no choice but to sell my house, to be able to finance these things.
Yeah. Joe, look, we appreciate you telling us your story, and I think we should stay in touch, actually, as you continue this fight. Just take us through some of the charities that have helped you, some of the organisations that have helped you during this journey, because I think that's useful for our viewers to know who may be going through similar things.
Yeah, so brain cancer research, they have been brilliant. My daughter and I intend to run the 31 miles in August to raise money for brain tumour research. Brains Trust, again, they're fantastic. And also Brain Cancer Justice. Everybody needs to get behind brain cancer justice. You know, it's...
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. Thank you so much for talking to us this morning. We really appreciate it, and good luck with your treatment.
Thank you, Jo.
Thank you very much.
All the best to you.
Thank you.
OK, let's take a look at the weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
And it looks mainly dry, very warm, locally hot, but the heatwave conditions will become confined to the southwest at the weekend. It's warm and dry out now, but misty, low cloud over the northern and eastern parts bring the risk of a little bit of rain. That cloud is going to clear to coastal regions this morning, leaving plenty of sunshine, but northeast England and northern Scotland will be a bit slower than the rest of the country to brighten up.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, all this hot weather has made it very risky as far as wildfires are concerned. In fact, in just a moment, we're going to get an update on the fire in the Cairngorm, so don't go away.
The first time I drove a Formula One car was 1983, the end of the season, when McLaren decided to give
Opening hours of the war on Iran, a primary school was hit by a missile designed to blow up military bunkers.
What I've seen that was done by Iran.
We've been investigating.
Can you explain why you cannot reveal what happened in Minab?
Denial, denial.
And we've travelled to Minab. Grave after grave is overwhelming. To gather evidence and talk to victims.
I just have a question, why?
An interview that lasted nearly 5 minutes. We talked about Prime Minister Starmer. We talked about the special relationship with who he said. It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
Everything in America feels kind of torn in two right now, and it has been an intense few weeks for Minneapolis.
How many more people have to die?
This is not America.
A large and growing protest movement. They're vocal and they're angry.
Are these immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
We just arrived in Doha, just ahead of President Trump, and look at that. The horse-backed military, and beyond them, the skyline of a city transformed.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
What do America's Christian faithful make of the president's pop at the Pope?
The ones that vote for him are going to vote for him through thick and thin.
Before anybody criticizes the Pope, they need to think more than twice.
Mark Stone from Sky News. Will you stop buying Russian energy? Is there any assurance for Palestinian self-determination? Of course. It's a big shift by President Trump.
Shift. This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's a big shift. It's very positive.
Sky News, the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News. Is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
Now, wildfire in the Highlands has been contained after burning an area of more than 3 miles.
Yeah, the blaze in the Cairngorms National Park began on Wednesday morning with a number of homes and businesses around Glenmore closed and evacuated. Well, let's talk now to volunteer firefighter David Olds, who's been helping tackle the fire. Very good morning to you, David. And I know that you're on standby in case you're needed, so if you do have to whisk away, do shout. But tell us a little bit about the process of trying to contain this fire and what's the situation like now?
The situation at the moment, it's as I believe it is becoming contained. Through the night, the wind died slightly and dampness came in to the ground. It allows firefighters to manage the fire and come up with to reevaluate the plan. But it's very much a very complex situation with a lot of businesses at risk, a lot of people's livelihoods at risk, and just a lot of risks throughout with the terrain that firefighters are on and community people, asset register and things.
Yeah, David, unfortunately we don't have loads of time. Good morning to you. Is this something that you're seeing more frequently happening now for you guys? I know you're a volunteer.
Yeah, so each year we're seeing complex wildfires. We were called to a fire on the A9 carriageway yesterday that was possibly caused by a discarded cigarette. So yeah, there's fires popping up a lot of the times.
Well, David Olds, I think we're going to have to leave it there. It's very brief, but I'm sure your message is to members of the public is to be extremely careful because of the risks. But I'm so sorry that we're going to have to say goodbye. But thank you very much and good luck with all your work. It's such important work.
Thank you, David. Appreciate what you do and all and your team. All right, that's all from this hour of morning, but we'll be back in a few minutes' time with your headlines.
Exactly, all the top stories coming.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Hello and a very good morning. It's 8 o'clock. This is Mornings with Jones and Melbourne. I'm Anna.
And I'm Kamali. Thanks for starting your day with us. Here's how
Andy Burnham becomes Labour leader today with a set-piece lunchtime speech. Pressure now on to pick the right Chancellor.
Meanwhile, his predecessor has given his final interview, insisting he left the country better than he found it.
President Trump accuses China of committing 2020 election fraud and orders an FBI investigation. His conclusions have been met with a high degree of scepticism by experts.
Also ahead of this hour, we're going to be talking about regional accents and how having one could mean facing discrimination in the workplace.
Multiple experts tell a Sky News investigation all the evidence points towards the US being responsible for a deadly attack on an Iranian primary school.
Good morning and thank you for being with us. After an unchallenged run, Andy Burnham will become the leader of the Labour Party today. He begins with a set-piece speech at lunchtime, which will bring you live here, of course, on Sky News.
His promise that he'll make the party unashamedly Labour. Well, we're still waiting on his first major decision, though. Who's going to be his next Chancellor?
Well, there are a few options in the frame. Shabana Mahmood, current Home Secretary, heavily rumoured as favourites to take over at the Treasury. Ed Miliband is being pushed by many who argue he would have the strongest signal of a change of strategy if he were to be given the job. He worked at the Treasury under Gordon Brown, of course, though concerns have been raised about whether or not he'd have the backing of the markets. Other potential include Yvette Cooper, who claims years of experience in government and also served in the Treasury under Prime Minister Gordon Brown.
So let's bring in Lucy McDade, our political correspondent, who's here with us. Morning to you, Lucy. So lots of speculation about Chancellor, but generally about what Andy Burnham is going to be like as Prime Minister. What are we likely to hear today?
Yeah, there has been a little bit of criticism, probably not surprisingly, from the likes of the Conservatives, for example. They don't feel like they've heard much of a plan from Andy Burnham. Today, we will hear a little more, although I think, to be perfectly honest, more of what we've heard before. We've heard Andy Burnham talk about how under his premiership he wants more growth in every postcode, devolution. You know, he wants to bring a lot of what he did in Manchester right across the country, giving more powers to local areas, for example, over things like housing and transport. He believes that can be a real driver of economic growth. He talks about being authentically Labour. One of the criticisms of the party under Keir Starmer is that they haven't really been true to their core values. Well, Andy Burnham will say that he wants to do more of that. I don't think anything particularly new, although he is going to become Prime Minister on Monday, maybe over the next few weeks, over the summer, while Parliament isn't sitting. We will get a kind of a number of policy announcements from him. But overwhelmingly, he's been supported by Labour MPs, 379 of them. So no contest, a coronation for Andy Burnham.
Indeed. All right, well, Lucy, stay with us, please, because as Burnham arrives, his predecessor has given his final interview as Prime Minister.
Yes, speaking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, Sir Keir Starmer insisted that he leaves the country in a better position than he found it.
It's good to know that actually after what's been quite a rough few months that you are very optimistic actually about walking out of the door.
I go with pride. I go knowing that I leave the country in a better state than I found it, and I go knowing I've left the foundation for Labour to win the next general election.
Yeah.
And I go out and I will immediately that afternoon spend time with Vic and the kids. And I look forward to that.
As you hand on the baton, you believe that you set Andy Burnham up to win the next general election, and part of the next phase of this administration's success is your success.
I hope so. We've built the foundation for this now, and Labour can go on and win that election. I think we'll go on and win that election. I'm proud to hand over the party in good shape to Andy Burnham, hand over the country in good shape to Andy Burnham. I will support him all the way. I'll give advice if it's asked for, and I'll give it privately. I will not give advice if it's not asked for, and I certainly won't give it publicly. I will give my full support, and that is what I mean. I want my country to thrive, and I'm sure it'll be a great success going forward.
So, Lucy, even his body language looks more relaxed there, doesn't it? As he's on his way out, chatting to Beth Rigby. And any talked quite movingly about the sort of the personal advantages of stopping, spending more time with his family, but very keen to protect his legacy, very serious about that.
Yeah, I don't think it's no surprise, no coincidence that Keir Starmer chose to spend his final few days as Labour leader and Prime Minister in Ukraine. He has a very close relationship with the Ukrainian president. On the international stage, he has... on the world stage, he has, achieved a lot. A lot of even his critics say that it's where he's been most successful as Prime Minister. So that he wants very clearly to be a part of his legacy. As you say, he spoke very honestly about wanting to spend more time with his family, the impact that those arson attacks on his family home, for example, had on him. I think, again, unsurprisingly, really, he looks like a man with the weight of the world off his shoulders. And perhaps that is inevitably the case when you decide that it's effectively the end of your political career and kind of the difficult decisions are no longer down to you.
Any idea what he will do next? Of course, he's staying as the MP for St Pancras and, or is it Somerstown? But what will he do next?
St Holborn and Pancras.
St Holborn and St Pancras. There you go.
There had been suggestions about what he would do. Would he go on to a role kind of at the UN or something to do with NATO? And again, given what we were just talking about, maybe you could see Keir Starmer wanting to do some of that. He did interestingly say that he won't be a backseat driver, but we do see all former Prime Ministers, I think, say, I won't get involved, I won't give any advice to my successor, and then, they come out with an article every week in one of the newspapers. So maybe he'll do that, maybe he'll write a book. I don't know. At the moment, he says that he's going to kind of spend more time with his family, but we'll see. I'm sure, as with every previous Prime Minister, he'll be back in some way.
Well, indeed. Lucy?
Thanks, Lucy. Thank you.
A reminder, of course, we'll have the build-up to that speech from Mr Burnham at lunchtime, live here on Sky News.
Yeah, we're going to have a special programme with Sophie.
We are indeed.
So do stay tuned for that today. Now then, 7 independent experts have concluded that all the evidence points towards the US being responsible for a deadly attack on an Iranian primary school.
Yeah, their comments contradict Donald Trump's repeated claims that the US might not be behind the bombing on the first day of the war.
They were responding to a major Sky News investigation into the bombing, which also found that precision weapons were used, as our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire reports.
There is no doubt that this was a school and that 120 children were killed when the missiles hit Minab. But ever since the strike on the very first day of the war, the US has produced conflicting claims at the highest levels about why it was hit and who hit it.
It's horrible what happened, but there were missiles flying all over the place, and somebody said it was our missile. Well, maybe it wasn't our missile, but I've seen nothing to lead me to believe it was. If you come up with the right answer, I don't think it's going to be us.
Well, we can give an answer, and our investigation shows that this wasn't just missiles flying around. This was a precision strike. All the evidence points to US responsibility. 7 independent experts agreed with that conclusion. We spent months combing through footage and satellite imagery to understand the layout of the school. We then worked with research agency Forensic Architecture to rebuild the school virtually, using frames from the videos we found to create a photorealistic 3D layout. We combined that with post-strike footage to show where the missile hit. Here you can see the crater it left, the yellow circle, right in the middle of the school. This is the assembly hall, and it's where witnesses have told us teachers gathered children for their safety after they heard the news that the war had started. That precision strike is exactly how the US carries out attacks.
Well, I can tell you that looking at that post-strike imagery, I knew right off the bat that this was either a US or Israeli strike. You had points of impact that were near dead center in each of these, 7 to 9 buildings that were hit, including the school. This is our common technique, at least for buildings of that size, where you can penetrate through to the center of that building, have ammunition that will be contained, where the blast will be contained inside that building.
If it was just the school that had been hit, it might be possible to blame an errant missile. But this was a pattern for the wider complex in Minab, including other civilian buildings. Sky's Data and Forensics Unit has investigated the site. This is that complex that lay next to, but separate from the school. It was associated with an Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps missile brigade. Experts told us it was likely administrative in nature. we can reveal that at least 9 of the sites were used by civilians. 5 of them were hit, all right in the centre. This was a clinic and pharmacy, also made public on Instagram and widely reported in local media. It was a well-known landmark in Minab, administered by the IRGC, but used by the public. This was a cultural centre. You can see on satellite imagery that both buildings were levelled. The school children often visited the auditorium inside. 7 of the children you see in this video were killed in the strike on the school. Each yellow dot represents a missile strike on the complex. You can see the clear pattern of attack. Tomahawk missiles were used in the strike, and the US is the only belligerent in this war that has them. We also know that 1 US carrier strike group was in range of Minab. 3 of the ships are Tomahawk capable, and footage publicised by the US shows the USS Spruance firing them towards Iran on the day of the attack. This is all information that is publicly available, even if it took us some digging. The US military has far more resources and a strong moral imperative to identify whether a target is used by civilians. Whatever calculations were made, they went ahead with the strike. And that decision killed scores of children. Tom Cheshire, Sky News.
Well, our international editor, Dominic Waghorn, is here, and if you've seen the documentary, you'll see that Dominic is part of that, and you can see it if you scan the QR code. Well worth watching, Dominic. And what is the latest on this investigation? Because Mark Stone, our US correspondent, did get to ask a question to the White House press secretary
Mark's done it
last night.
He's done an amazing job trying to speak truth to power, if you like, trying to ask the central CENTCOM commander what's going on with the investigation, and now pressing the president and also his spokeswoman, Caroline Levitt. And I think what's slightly depressing about this is that American officials are not answering the question they're being asked. They either say, well, the investigation's ongoing, and we know the investigation is over. So the investigation, we've been told by a number of sources now, is complete. And what happens is it is then subject to review by politicians and those people who are involved in it, as happened with investigations. So in the sense that it's the process isn't over, but the investigation is complete. So for Caroline Levitt to say, well, it's still an investigation underway is a bit disingenuous, to be honest. And then for her to say, well, as other officials have, America does not deliberately target civilians. That's not an issue here. No one's saying that. What she's being asked and others is, did America do this? And she repeated that to Mark Stone yesterday, as other officials have. So taking a step back from this, we now know America did do this. The evidence is overwhelming. As Tom was saying there in his report, we have identified that these were cruise missiles, Tomahawk cruise missiles, only Americans have them, fired in a cluster into the area around the school. We don't have a shot of the silhouette of the missile that hit the school, but we do know from a number of well-qualified experts that the crater in the middle of that school was caused by a Tomahawk missile. It's consistent with the Tomahawk missile, and only America was firing them on that day in this war. So that really is uncontestable. So that is sort of where the government is. And what's worrying, I think, is that they do seem to be now obstructing the investigation in the sense that, as we were reporting yesterday, there are concerns within the American military that Donald Trump's consistent refusals to accept America did do this, in fact saying that he thinks Iran did it, that is hampering the investigation. Because if the commander-in-chief says one thing, you can't contradict that if you're below him. Mm-hmm. So it is one of the worst mass civilian casualty incidents in modern warfare. And astonishingly, the American president, rather than sort of expressing horror and shock and fessing up to the fact that America did this, as it has in previous such incidents, is, it seems, trying to sort of spout falsehoods about it. We shouldn't be that surprised, because that is something we've seen from Donald Trump in the past, but it is worrying about what it says about where this war is going, of course.
Yeah, and Dom, last time we spoke to Nicholas Hopton, former UK ambassador to Iran, and we put to him what all of this is doing to the US standing in the world. Let's have a listen, we'll talk again off the back.
Honesty would be the best course of action for a government to take, to put their hand up and say, we made a mistake, this wasn't deliberate, it was an error, but still, it shouldn't have happened. It's led to a terrible loss of life of young school children and teachers, and I think the sooner CENTCOM report The sooner the US it does the honest thing, the better for the US's reputation and for obviously the reputation of the West more generally.
Echoing your points there, Dom, but later in the conversation, we also talked about the fact that the war is continuing now and more targets have been struck.
Yes, and the fact that they are not publishing the results means that people like us, people like Tom Cheshire, people in our amazing forensics and data team have been digging into what we know. And we now have this whistleblower who was in the American targeting team until recently, who has astonishingly revealed the fact that the database, the Defense Intelligence Agency database, the Pentagon uses to draw all its targeting data from, is out of date. It's not updated regularly. And the expectation was when it came to war, there would be time to update it. But because there's been such a rush, more targets have been hit in this war than any other war. American officials, Pete Hegseth, who says there'll be no more stupid rules of engagement, as he calls it. He's been very proud of the fact they've hit so many targets. And Wes Bryant, another whistleblower, has said to us, in the first 5 days of this war, the Americans hit more targets than in 6 months of the war on ISIS and other targets in Syria. So that sort of telescoping of targeting, because it's come from dodgy data, arguably and allegedly, has led to incidents like this. And of course now we're going back, as you say, to, it seems, the Americans targeting and hitting Iran in earnest again, because the war has kind of resumed. It's targeting, it seems, quasi-civilian, dual-use places like railway stations, railway lines. And if the data is dodgy, and if the Americans are not learning the mistakes from Menard because they haven't published, and it seems parts of this investigation have not been fully reviewed, then you have to say the chances of another terrible atrocity like Menard happening again have to remain fairly high, which of course is of great concern, as well as America's standing in the world and the standing of the West along with it.
Absolutely.
Dominic, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. And we should just say that we put the evidence in our documentary and the expert assessments to the White House, to CENTCOM, the Department of War and the Defense Intelligence Agency to respond to the allegations. None of them would comment, and Donald Trump has consistently said he doesn't think America was responsible for the tragedy.
Now, staying with President Trump, and he has accused China of committing election fraud in 2020. He used an address to the nation last night to say that China wanted him to lose that election.
Well, that's despite an assessment from US intelligence that found no evidence of foreign interference. So let's listen to what Donald Trump had to say.
Over a period of years, starting during the 2020 election cycle, the People's Republic of China carried out what is believed to be the largest compromise of election data in history, resulting in China's illicit acquisition of 220 million U.S. voter files. That information includes names, addresses, phone numbers, political party preferences, and other sensitive data that would be needed to register to vote and engage in other nefarious activities, which is exactly what was happening.
Well, Trump speaking last night, and listening was our US correspondent James Matthews.
It's not the first time we've heard Donald Trump question his country's election system. He has long argued that he lost the 2020 election because it was rigged, even though that is a claim that has been debunked through the years. As he spoke last night, the White House released newly declassified documents, even if they didn't necessarily back up his claims of election interference. Trump said that China had worked to undermine his first administration and his 2020 campaign. That is a claim that his own intelligence agencies dismissed at the time. He said that China had illegally acquired 220 million voter files, even though that's something that can be accessed publicly. As an address to the nation, it was very much a high-profile assault on the integrity of America's voting system by its president. Trump has an eye on November's midterm elections, and he ended his address last night by urging support for legislation that he wants to introduce, the Save America Act. That would require more stringent checks on voter eligibility. He says it's designed to prevent election fraud. His critics say he wants to restrict his opponent's vote.
was James Matthews reporting there from Washington, D.C. I just want to bring you a line of breaking news that we've had come into us here at Sky News from the Metropolitan Police. They are saying that a 39-year-old man has been charged with a National Security Act offence following a proactive investigation by the counter-terror police. They say this individual was arrested on Wednesday, the 15th of July, in Birmingham on suspicion of an offence under Section 3 of the National Security Act, assisting a foreign intelligence service, and they say that that country is Iran.
Yeah, this is Vahid Abari of Liverpool that police say was charged with assisting a foreign intelligence service, and they say he's been remanded in custody and is due to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court later today.
OK. Just to say, after we heard from James Matthews and heard Donald Trump speaking about those accusations towards China, the Chinese embassy in Washington has said that Beijing has never and will never interfere in presidential elections in the United States. All right, we're staying with this story. Let's bring in Sir Peter Westmacott, former British ambassador to the US. Sir Peter, always good to speak with you. Thank you so much for making the time, and good morning to you. I mean, first, what did you make of what you heard from President Trump then last night?
Well, I'll make a comment on it in a second, but can I, Kamali, just say a quick word on your earlier report about the Minab school? Because, almost 5 months ago when this happened, I remember saying that I thought it was unconscionable that the American military authorities had said nothing about what happened and how those children were killed. And I do echo what Nick Hopton was saying, that I think that it would be good for America and it would be good for the credibility of the broader messaging that's coming out of the Pentagon if they were to come clean. Everybody seems to know now that this was an error of targeting. This was not a deliberate slaughter of school children. But why not say so? And it seems that President Trump says, well, nobody will ever know. Well, they do know. They know exactly what happened. And he says that maybe the evidence that it was a Tomahawk missile comes from artificial intelligence, which is demonstrably not the case. So I congratulate your colleagues for the work that they've done on this, but I do think it's high time that Hegseth and or the White House and or CENTCOM or whoever it is should come clean and explain what happened, that this was a terrible mistake, because otherwise people are simply not going to believe the messaging that is coming out of the US military authorities. So forgive me, I just wanted to say that because it's an issue that I too have followed quite closely for the last few months. But on your question, I think what we're looking at is a concern on the part of the president that he may well lose, or his party, the Republican Party, may well lose in the midterms. They will lose the House. There's a possibility even they could lose the Senate. And so he's gearing everybody up for measures that he might take to not so much rig the result, but interfere with the process, whether he's going to send in the National Guard or whether he's going to raise other questions about the legitimacy or the holding of those elections, we do not know. But when he says there are shocking vulnerabilities in terms of foreign governments interfering with election campaigns in the past, and this cannot be allowed to continue, he said in his broadcast. Now, that's a pretty clear warning that he is going to be gearing up to doing something to ensure that he is not seen to be a loser. He likes nothing less than being seen to be a loser, as we know. So I think it's a rather worrying broadcast. Curiously, one of the bits of evidence that was made public that was declassified last night was the clear evidence of Russian interference in the election in 2016 on his behalf. But he doesn't seem to have said much about that.
Well, yeah, and this is, I mean, how unusual is it for a national address like this, and the content of it, and also the fact that a number of US networks chose not to show it live because they were concerned that they might want to challenge some of what he said. What do you make of that?
Well, he's been at war with some of the networks, as we know, and there have been lawsuits and almost blackmail and demands for payment from some of the broadcast networks in the United States from the Trump administration. So it's been a difficult relationship. And those which are still hanging on to their independence do not wish to be seen to be simply a mouthpiece for government propaganda. So I suspect that's why some of them didn't want to carry live something which was not, in their judgment, an issue of national importance, but was simply another rant, as some of them would see it, from the president about the risk of him losing an election and therefore preparing the ground, rolling the pitch, whatever cliche you want to use, in advance of it. So not entirely surprising, but it's made him very cross that not everybody carried live the words that he was issuing from the White House.
And so, Peter, look, we've seen this playbook before. Prior to the election, there was lots of discussion from Donald Trump that the election was going to be rigged, and if he lost, it would have been because it's unfair. How much do you think now in 2026 that same message is going to resonate with the American public? We're seeing Trump with quite low approval rating. It's widely suspected that they will lose control of both houses of Parliament, of Congress, in the midterms. So what do you think the message will be? Do you think it will be hitting a nerve with some in the US?
Kamali, our connection is a little weak. I'm speaking to you from Turkey. Something's gone a bit wrong, but I got the gist of your question. I do think you're right that this has got a lot to do with the fact that the latest approval ratings from very objective organizations put him at no more than 37%. This is historic low for presidents of the United States. And all the signs are that, the House will go. If the House goes, there is a risk of further impeachment proceedings for all sorts of things that he's been up to, whether it's corruption or whether it's abuse of office. There's a long list that the Democrats can come up with. And it was very telling, for example, that the confirmation hearing for the man that he wants to be the Director of National Intelligence, just yesterday on television, he would not say that President Biden won the election in 2020 because election denial is, it seems, a kind of a job qualification for people who want to get a senior job in the Trump administration. So this is all about, it's about going backwards and validating his own complaints and conspiracy theories, but it is also about trying to warn off the risk of him losing the midterms. And then, of course, what happens then, lame duckery, and you've got the 2028 presidential elections after that. And this Save America Act, which is not going to go through because even Republicans in the Senate don't really believe it, is an attempt to limit the amount of votes that cast by people who he thinks would vote against him. So there's a lot of monkey business going on in the margins of the democratic process in the United States. And we have to see last night's remarks, I think, as an indication of real concern on his part that the midterms will not go his way.
Your line is glitching very slightly, Sir Peter, but we can hear what you're saying. Just the picture is breaking up a bit. I just want to acknowledge that to our viewers, but it's not your fault at all. You talked about how the Republicans are struggling ahead of the midterms. To what extent is the Iran war featuring in people's thoughts when they make their decisions? Is the ongoing conflict having an impact there?
I think, Anna, there are very few votes in the United States, either amongst Republicans or Democrats, for being nice to or soft on Iran. The memories are long, the hostages that were taken back at the time of the revolution, slaughter of innocent civilians back in January during those demonstrations. And there's a lot of reasons why lots of people in America do not care for the current regime or indeed the past regime in Iran. That said, the consequences of Trump's war against Iran are much higher gas prices for people who want to go and fill their cars at the tank, higher levels of inflation, some shortages, problems for the global oil trade, pharmaceuticals, petrochemicals, helium, a lot of trade that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. And I think there is a growing awareness that one of the unintended consequences of his war has been to hand the Iranians an extraordinarily powerful weapon in terms of the control of the Strait of Hormuz. We always knew it was there, but it had never been tested before. Now it is. And Americans are seeing that this has not actually been a brilliant initiative. They're also beginning to see that regardless of how many bombs you drop and people you kill, it doesn't actually have the effect on Iran that Donald Trump thought it would. They haven't capitulated. They haven't given up. For them, this is an existential battle, and they can take an awful lot of punishment. And they seem to think that they can hold out, that they can stare Trump down by the control that they can exercise over the Strait of Hormuz. And this does have an impact on people's lives in America. And I think it is therefore not good news for the midterms. So he'd like to see this ended. But at the moment, he doesn't want to see the Iranians, if you like, ending up on the winning side with control of the Strait of Hormuz. There's a bit of a standoff between the two sides, but it doesn't play well at home. And the longer this war continues, I think the worse it plays for the president in terms of public support.
OK, so Peter Westmacott, former British ambassador to the United States, thank you very much for your time this morning. Now, Sir Peter did mention our documentary on the Iran school bombing. We should say that President Trump has consistently said he doesn't think America was responsible for the tragedy. We await the result of the official investigation, and you can watch the full documentary for yourself if you scan that QR code there that's on screen right now.
Now then, stay with us. We're going to be talking about Andy Burnham's first day today. He'll be declared leader of the Labour Party later on today. Lots of questions about who's going to be in his top team come Monday when he becomes Prime Minister. We're going to be speaking to Sir Keir Starmer's former communications chief, James Lyons. Now, under-16s in England are going to be banned from buying high-caffeine energy drinks from April next year. So let's find out a little bit more. Barnaby is here. So, Barnaby, talk us through it. It's quite a bold move.
Yeah, well, it was last proposed last year, but we now know the government is saying they want to ban high-caffeinated drinks to under-16s from April 2027. I think we should just define what a high-caffeine drink is. The government say it's a drink that contains over 150 milligrams of caffeine per litre, but they're excluding coffee and tea from that. So the main focus is on fizzy drinks like Prime, like Monster, like Relentless, which the government say children are drinking and they shouldn't be. So public health ministers and education ministers say it affects concentration, it affects anxiety, and it's having an impact on sleep. So these energy drinks will be banned to under 16-year-olds from cafes, from shops, and interestingly, from vending machines. Quite interesting there. No one is now going to be able to buy an energy drink from a vending machine. Why? Because how can a vending machine check whether you're over 16 or under 16? So none of us will be able to buy energy drinks from vending machines anymore. this is going to put quite a burden on retailers if they do sell to somebody who is under the age of 16. A fine, of up to £2,500, which will be enforced by local authorities. So quite a heavy fine.
So they have to ask for proof, basically.
They do have to ask for proof, and that's why vending machines are just being banned altogether, because they can't ask for proof for obvious reasons. Now, if all this sounds quite familiar, it's because many retailers have been having voluntary bans on selling energy drinks to under 16 since 2018. And the government are now catching up to that. They say that ban hasn't always been enforced in these supermarkets. And of course, this will now apply across the board.
Barnaby, a quick thought about the caffeine levels, because of course, coffee and tea aren't banned under this thing, and coffee has high levels of caffeine.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. So certain cups of takeaway coffee can have levels of caffeine far exceeding some of these energy drinks which are included in the ban. The government did consult on this, and what they are saying is that there is less evidence that children are using coffee and tea in the same way that they're drinking energy drinks. They also say that some of the marketing in energy drinks is more directed at children. It's brighter, it's bolder colours, and that's not the same with coffee. So coffee and tea not included, but no energy drinks for under 16s from April.
Interesting stuff. Barnaby, thanks very much indeed.
No, we're going to hear from,
Go ahead.
Andy Burnham, his first speech later on today. You can join us for that live at midday.
Yes, indeed. But in the meantime, let's speak to his former comms director, James Lyons, who's here with us. Very good morning to you. Nice to see you.
Sir Keir Starmer's, not Andy
Sir Keir Starmer's, I apologise.
Yes, indeed. Happy Coronation Day.
Well,
is that what we're calling it?
I think so, yes. Andy Burnham is being coronated Labour leader today, isn't it?
Are you happy about it being a coronation?
Well, look, actually, when Andy announced he was running for Makerfield, which is actually, it's only just over a month or so ago, isn't it? I actually predicted that he would win and he would be installed as Labour leader and Prime Minister without a contest, just because he had this sort of extraordinarily broad support across the parliamentary Labour Party, and that's what we're seeing today.
But to Anna's question, is it a good thing that he's going to be crowned?
Do you regret there being no contest? Yeah.
No, I think it's absolutely sensible. I think what you always see in any party leadership contest is the contenders playing to the membership, who, let's face it, are not representative of the country. And then what you always see is them sort of moving back to the centre as an election approaches. Now, obviously, when there's a transition in government, you don't have that time to recalibrate. So I think it's a good thing for the Labour Party, and I think it's a good thing for the country.
What do you make of how he's handled this strange in-between period where we've all known that he was going to end up, going to end up Prime Minister, but he hasn't got the big job yet? Do you think that he's been transparent enough about what he intends for the country? Do you think he could have given more detail on policy? Do you think he could have given more interviews where he's kind of accepted a bit of scrutiny?
Well, I think, actually, we know an awful lot about what Andy Burnham is going to do when he's in Downing Street on Monday. Arguably more than we knew that Keir Starmer was going to do when he came in. But, that's a different issue, because obviously there wasn't a clear plan for what was going to get done.
They did have a manifesto.
They did have a manifesto. I helped to write it, but, it wasn't the most detailed of documents, if I can gently put it.
We'll come on to your failings in a moment. Just answer
the... So, look, I think it's pretty clear. Andy Burnham believes in reindustrialisation. I think we're going to see more drilling in the North Sea for oil and gas. I think he's made social care a priority. He wants to see investment in infrastructure outside of London to drive growth. He's a big believer in vocational education, which is why he produced the Manchester Baccalaureate. He's going to stick to the manifesto red lines on tax, but he wants to find other ways to raise money. I think we know an awful lot about what Andy Burnham's going to be up to.
So, one of the failings, because as promised, was that Keir Starmer couldn't tell a story properly, and you were sort of, as his comms chief, responsible for some of that. What was the issue with Sir Keir Starmer, and what can Andy Burnham do? What will Andy Burnham do differently, in your opinion?
Well, look, I think it's clear that Andy is a very strong communicator. He's very comfortable in his own skin. He's very relaxed. You can see that in his media performances. You can also see it through his social media thing. And there is. The Labour Party have been handed a golden opportunity here to have a second go at a first impression. And so I understand entirely why he would want to keep some of the more detailed policy under wraps until next week. If I was advising him, I'd be going for a shock and awe approach next week, rather like the last Labour government did back in 1997.
So sort of that was pretty much, as I remember it, an announcement pretty much every day, like a big announcement, like independence of the Bank of England and foreign policy measures as well. That would be quite interesting. So we could get a kind of whole host of
I think
early
we'll see.
doors.
I think we'll see definitely a kind of raft of announcements next week. I would expect we'll see something on cost of living because, of course, Andy's also said he wants to give people breathing space on the cost of living, and we know that that is the #1 priority for people in this country. You know, I think you know you are going to see a change of style. You're going to see a more relaxed, more conversational style from the new Prime Minister.
Can I get you to comment on what we're hearing this morning about there being some disquiet about who might well be Chancellor in this choice between the right and the left of the party? I mean, how does he manage that, and then how is that decision sort of communicated out to the public?
Well, look, this is a really key appointment, clearly, with everything that's going on in the economic space. And I think, you know, if I can say the danger for Andy Burnham here is what we saw with Keir Starmer. He was elected with a landslide that nobody thought he could get, but support was very broad but shallow. The danger for Andy Burnham is he's becoming Prime Minister off the back of support across the Parliamentary Labour Party. That is very broad, but if he doesn't get it right, could turn out to be very shallow. So he's got to balance the competing interests and form a cabinet as a whole that represents all of those different tribes and factions and wings within the Parliamentary Labour Party, which is no small task.
I was going to say, is that even possible to do?
Well, look, you'd have to look at it across the piece, right? And people are fixating on one particular appointment here, but, you know, there will be a broader team that he will need to assemble. And look, you know, it's fortunate that the Labour Party have strong candidates from different parts of the party.
So today, Andy Burnham takes over as leader of the Labour Party, and it's quite an unusual moment, isn't it, for Labour to get rid of one of their own leaders?
So the Labour Party have only ever got rid of 2 leaders in modern political history, and they are the only 2 leaders who have won an election in the last 50 years, which tells you something about the Labour Party.
Yeah, but how does it feel to be Keir Starmer today, do you think? I mean, you've worked closely with him. How do you think he's feeling?
Well, I watched Beth's excellent interview with him, and actually what I thought came across is that he's very much reconciled to it now. Whatever's happened has happened. He looked, again, to come back to that phrase, you know, he looked comfortable in his own skin in that interview and
his voice
relaxed.
Has changed a little bit. Have you noticed that? He seems to have changed the way he speaks.
I hadn't noticed that. What's the difference?
A less tense way of speaking,
Oh, I
a
see
more
what you mean.
relaxed way of speaking.
Yeah. And look, this always happens to politicians, right? When the pressures of the job are in the rear-view mirror, as it were, you always see them become, more relaxed, I guess. And you saw that actually with Ed Miliband, if you remember. You know, once he stopped being Labour leader, he was a man transformed in many ways.
Pressures of the job, huh?
Yeah. Well, James Lyons, thanks so much for coming by and reflecting on what's a big few days for the Labour Party. And the country, I guess, the new Prime Minister.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
Yep, and of course we will bring you Andy Burnham's big speech at 12 o'clock today.
Indeed. Now then, Ukrainians have been protesting a decision by President Zelensky to remove the country's defence minister, Mikhailo Fedorov.
Yeah, these were the protests here in Kyiv and in other cities across the country at this decision by Zelensky to remove Fedorov from post. He has not been selected, it's kind of complicated, Ukrainian politics, but not been selected to take on continue in his role as defence minister. He's a young man, 35 years old. There he is giving a speech yesterday where he was very critical of the Ukrainian leadership and some of the decisions that were made. There seems to have been a huge falling out between Mr. Fedorov and the Chief of the Army, Syrsky, about the future direction of the Ukrainian armed forces. Syrsky, who's described as an old-school warfighter, much more inclined to use tanks, artillery, whereas Fedorov is the man who is credited with this drone revolution that has revolutionised warfare, has been pushed out for now. But there is a growing movement within Ukraine for him actually to be given his job back. President Zelensky, while meeting Keir Starmer yesterday, is actually under quite a lot of pressure to reverse this decision.
Well, yes, and pressure from people on the streets, so people coming out to protest. More than 1,000 gathering outside the presidential office in Kyiv yesterday. And also a certain amount of kind of commentary, at least, from some of their international partners as well. So it's a huge focus for debate for the country.
It certainly is. And we'll keep a close eye on it as well, if there is any change in that decision. All right, stay with us here on Mornings. We're going to have a look at the weather next.
We are.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, today looks mainly dry and very warm, locally hot, but heatwave conditions will become largely confined to the southwest this weekend. It's mostly warm and dry out there right now, but misty low cloud over northern and eastern parts will bring the risk of drizzle. That cloud will mostly clear to coastal regions this morning to leave plenty of sunshine, but northeast England and northern Scotland look slow to brighten. Further drizzly outbreaks are possible there. It'll be a bit less hot, although some southern parts may still reach 30 degrees Celsius.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
All right, we'll stay with us here on Mornings because next the conversation I think is going to be pretty interesting. Is your accent holding you back? Well, it shouldn't. Many believe it might, and we're going to talk about all of that after the short break.
It's going to be really interesting.
Opening hours of the war on Iran, a primary school was hit by a missile designed to blow up military bunkers.
What I've seen, that was done by Iran.
We've been investigating.
Can you explain why you cannot reveal what happened in Minab?
Denial, denial.
And we've travelled to Minab. Grave after grave is overwhelming. To gather evidence and talk to victims.
I just have a question, why?
An interview that lasted nearly 5 minutes. We talked about Prime Minister Starmer. We talked about the special relationship with who he said. It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
Everything in America feels kind of torn in two right now, and it has been an intense few weeks for Minneapolis.
How many more people have to die?
This is not America.
A large and growing protest movement. They're vocal and they're angry.
Are these immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
We just arrived in Doha, just ahead of President Trump, and look at that. The horse-backed military and beyond them, the skyline of a city transformed.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
What do America's Christian faithful make of the president's pop at the Pope?
The ones that vote for him are going to vote for him through thick and thin.
Before anybody criticizes the Pope, they need to think more than twice.
Mark Stone from Sky News. Will you stop buying Russian energy? Is there any assurance for Palestinian self-determination? Of course. It's a big shift by President Trump.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's a big shift. It's very positive.
Sky News, the full story first.
Hear that whistle and that crunch. We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armory.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
So, regional accents, could they be holding people back? Clearly they shouldn't, but it's a topic that's been raised by several MPs just this week.
Yeah, well, the Sutton Trust was cited at a debate, and the author of the report and Professor of Language and Communications at the University of Oxford, Devyani Sharma, joins us now live, as does the criminal barrister and former chair of the Criminal Bar Association, Mary Pryor, joining us from Leicestershire. Professor Sharma, thank you very much for being with us. And Mary, thank you for joining us down the line. Professor Sharma, to you first of all, just give us a précis of your findings and what it tells us.
Yes, definitely. We've looked at how listeners react to a number of different accents across regions of the UK. And we've also looked at speakers' experiences and what they report. And on both sides, we see quite a bit of evidence of bias against certain regions. It's actually impossible to talk about attitudes to regions without talking about social class.
Mm-hmm.
So it's specifically attitudes to the more working class varieties of certain regional accents that we found bias towards. And we were specifically focused on access to elite professions and found that there may be some risk that that access is impeded by these kinds of attitudes.
And what are the attitudes? I mean, you say prejudice. What form does that take?
One way that we tried to test this was looking at job interviews saying exactly the same thing in an interview with different accents, and we found that certain accents were judged to be less competent, for example, for a trainee position at a law firm, looking across the nation at attitudes. And we found just with accent alone, no difference in what they said. Some voices were judged less competent professionally. So we tested northern accents and London working class accents. In fact, it was the working class London accents that had the most bias in this particular study. But there is also evidence of bias against a number of regional accents of a similar kind.
Mary Pryor, let's bring you in. And hear a little bit about your experience. I mean, you're a KC, you're a criminal barrister, and have done incredibly well in your career. But did you feel at any points that your accent held you back in some way, or people had prejudices towards it?
Only since the age of 4. The reality is that wherever you are, if you are working class, which I was, and you are either northern or you have a strong southern accent, immediately people think you are less bright, less talented, and someone who they can look down on. So throughout my life, I have faced discrimination because I didn't have a privileged upbringing, and therefore I spoke like the people around me. But I'm delighted that I do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that's where the crossover is between the accent and then the socio-economic background, isn't it, Mary? Because obviously a supremely talented individual with an accent from the Midlands, but yet because you didn't go to the right school and have sort of the right way of speaking, people thought they could talk down to you and be better than you.
All my life, people have spoken to me like I have special needs, because I have a northern accent, and they will come and talk to me as if I am a child, even now. And I'm now 63. So I think I can say it's inappropriate to talk to me like I'm a baby, but people still think it's okay because I have a northern working class accent, which gets even stronger, I should say, when I'm angry.
And that's still happening to you now? I mean, I presume you're still practicing in courtrooms and county courtrooms, Crown courtrooms up and down the country, meeting your colleagues, and they're still treating you in that way?
Some of them do. If you think about the profession that we're in, if you were putting people in a uniform, the vast majority of people at the top of every profession are those who come from the most exceptional backgrounds, the best universities, have the best start in life. And it's getting better, don't misunderstand me, it is getting better, but we are still exceptions, not the rule. And so I can see that I don't speak the same language. So I'm not in the same club as some of those people. And they still take the view that somehow you're a bit of an outsider. What I try and say to people, particularly young graduates who've worked twice as hard as those with privilege to get as far as they have, is don't change, because you become a robot if you do. You must stay who you are. All you need to do, you never need to change your accent. I'm Exhibit A. I'm a King's Counsel and I have never changed my accent. But what I have done, which you get free at private school, by the way, is I have learnt how to use it properly by making sure I finish my words and make sure that my mouth is slightly more open than ordinarily it would be, so everyone can hear what I'm saying. But I hope people will begin to understand that one of the reasons that this country is a beautiful place is because of the music that we can hear from each other's accents, the way that that allows us to be part of a community. It allows different cultural groups to be part of the same community, because you know from speaking to anyone who they are, where they come from, they are in your group.
Yeah.
But they want us to
really
stop
interesting, your experience, Mary. Professor Sharma, I mean, what do you make of what Mary has said there? Does it surprise you at all? And does it surprise you that now, when we've got people with lots of different accents, as there should be, across, broadcast media, we've got, presenters, actors, shouldn't attitudes be changing? Are they changing?
They are changing a little bit. So Mary is right that there has been a slight shift. We're hearing a lot more voices around us. The thing that's useful to focus on in the media, and especially what we think of as voices of authority, MPs, lawyers, is that we be careful to have diverse voices across diverse roles. That's what Mary is talking about as well. Because we can have regional voices in funny adverts or sports commentators, but that's more stereotyping in a way. So for employers to be aware that they should encourage use of one's own accent. In fact, Mary touched on something very important, which is if I'm trying to persuade you of something, I actually need my natural way of speaking because you'll know I'm being authentic, I'm being credible. So to polish that away, the public school system has a part in that, erasing that individuality. Actually, in some ways impedes communication because you can't show that shift to being genuine. So I think the diversity of voices is making a difference. Another positive that we found was some of these biases are quite light, so they can be shifted quite easily.
That's good to hear. Unfortunately, we've run out of time.
Yes. So interesting. Thank you both so much.
Thanks, guys. Really good conversation. We could have kept it going. And we've put on screen for viewers, if you guys have thoughts about this, if you've faced discrimination because of the way you speak, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you, and we'll be back with your headlines in a couple of minutes.
We will.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Hello and a very good morning. It's 9 o'clock. This is Mornings with Jones and Melbourne. I'm Anna.
And I'm Kamali. Thanks for starting your day with us. Here's how we're looking.
Andy Burnham becomes Labour leader today with a set-piece lunchtime speech. Pressure now on to pick the right Chancellor.
Meanwhile, his predecessor has given his final interview as Prime Minister, insisting he left the country better than he found it.
President Trump accuses China of committing 2020 election fraud and orders an FBI investigation. His conclusions have been met with a high degree of scepticism by experts.
Also ahead this hour, the summer holidays are here, but have our kids got the skills to deal with an emergency if they find it outdoors?
And multiple experts tell a Sky News investigation all the evidence points towards the US being responsible for a deadly attack on an Iranian primary school. Hello, very good morning. Thanks for joining us. So, after an unchallenged run, Andy Burnham becomes Labour leader today. And he begins with a set-piece speech this lunchtime, which we will, of course, bring you live here on Sky News.
Well, it's promised that he will make the party unashamedly Labour. We're still waiting, though, for his first major decision, who he's going to pick as Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Yes, so let's just run you through some of the options in the mix. Shabana Mahmood is being heavily rumoured as the favourite now to take over at the Treasury, though Ed Miliband is being pushed by many in the party who argue that he would be the strongest signal of a change in strategy. And Ed Miliband also worked at the Treasury under Gordon Brown, although concerns have been raised about whether or not he'd have the backing of the financial markets. And one other potential, Yvette Cooper, who claims years of experience in government, having also served in the Treasury under Gordon Brown.
Well, let's bring in our political correspondent, Lucy McDade, for a bit more of this. And Lucy, we are now in the final few hours, I guess, of speculating about Andy Burnham, because we might start getting some flesh on the bones.
Yes, we will hear from him. He's being appointed the Labour leader, of course, today. He's had the backing of 379 Labour MPs. The overwhelming majority of the Labour Party have decided to rally behind Andy Burnham, believing that he is the right man for the moment to change the Labour Party and their direction. You say there, will we hear more detail from him? Well, looking at kind of what we've been given, a preview of what he's going to say, I think it will be much of what we've heard before, this rhetoric about changing the culture within the Labour Party, about growth in every postcode. He wants to... One of the criticisms of him is that he talks a lot about Manchesterism and what he achieved as Mayor of Greater Manchester. Will it go down well with other parts of the country? Well, today he's likely to say that he'll be a leader for the North, the South, for Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. He'll talk about devolution. He'll talk about this idea that politics has kind of failed the country and that he is going to change that. Well, is that anything new from Andy Burnham? I don't think it really is. The pressure will be on him over the next few weeks, over the summer, to really put some meat on the bones and give us some more, really, because otherwise, as you were just saying, you know, we end up in this period of intense speculation, which arguably doesn't really help anybody.
Yeah, really interesting. Well, Lucy, stay with us, because as Andy Burnham arrives, his predecessor has given his final interview as Prime Minister.
Yeah, he was speaking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, and Sir Keir insisted he is leaving the country in a better position than he found it.
It's good to know that actually after what's been quite a rough few months that you are very optimistic actually about walking out of the door.
I go with pride. 10. I go knowing that I leave the country in a better state than I found it, and I go knowing I've left the foundation for Labour to win the next general election.
Yeah.
And I go out and I will immediately that afternoon spend time with Vic and the kids, and I look forward to that.
As you hand on the baton, you believe that you set Andy Burnham up to win the next general election, and part of the next phase of this administration's success is your success.
I hope so. We've built the foundation for this now, and Labour can go on and win that election. I think we'll go on and win that election. I'm proud to hand over the party in good shape to Andy Burnham, hand over the country in good shape to Andy Burnham. I will support him all the way. I'll give advice if it's asked for, and I'll give it privately. I will not give advice if it's not asked for, and I certainly won't give it publicly. I will give my full support, and that is what I mean. I want my country to thrive, and I'm sure it'll be a great success going forward.
Lucy, what do you make of that? I mean, he looks quite chilled, doesn't he? He looks a bit more relaxed, obviously. And, you know, talking very personally about his family again, but also fiercely defending his legacy.
Yeah, I think for a long time people have been desperately trying to eke out from Keir Starmer just a little bit more of that personality, because people have always said that behind the scenes they really like Keir Starmer, but one of the criticisms of him as Prime Minister was that we just never really got that much in public. There, probably unsurprisingly, really, he no longer has the job of Prime Minister. Well, officially, Andy Burnham will become Prime Minister on Monday, but he knows he's leaving that behind. He's much less stressed. He's got the weight of the world off his shoulders, and you can really see why. He spoke quite candidly about the real challenges that he's faced. You know, the arson attacks on his family home, trying to, he said, I thought the way he said it, trying to burn down my family home, kind of really hammers home just how intense that is for a Prime Minister wanting to spend more time with his children, and how difficult it is to effectively end your political career. Yes, he will continue as an MP, but, he quite simply won't have the platform that he has done for a number of years. So that was interesting, and no surprise as well that I think he chose to end his time as leader of the Labour Party in Ukraine. One of the ways in which we've seen Keir Starmer really stand up and achieve a lot has been on the world stage. He was there to say that support for Ukraine will continue no matter who the leader is. He announced some more funding as well. And I think President Zelensky gave him one of the the highest honours that can be given to a foreign leader as well. So that will be, I think, Keir Starmer's legacy is that international success.
Yeah, indeed. And so fascinating to see what he might do next, yes. Whether or not it is something related to...
Will it be a newspaper column? Will it be a book? Will it be...
Has he mentioned anything? Apart from spending time with
He says he's not going to give advice from the sidelines.
Yeah, he did, which is always funny, isn't it? Because I always think Rishi Sunak said that he would do... There was an interview once that Rishi Sunak gave where he was asked to give advice, and he said, that's just not what I'm going to do. Now he has a column every week, doesn't he? Yeah. So there's always a bit of that. There were roles being floated around. Would he do something in NATO? Which a few people have laughed off as saying, well, that's just a bit ridiculous, because what experience does he have? I'm sure we will see him come back in some way, and I'm sure he's been thinking about what those next steps will be. Maybe first, a big holiday.
Yeah.
Yes.
Would you? I would.
Right. Yeah, I would, yeah.
Lisa, appreciate you.
Thank you
so much. And just to remind you, we will have build-up to that big speech at lunchtime, live here on Sky News.
Yeah, we're so fish.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Indeed, it's going to be really interesting.
Yes.
So, now, 7 independent experts have concluded that all the evidence points towards the US being responsible for a deadly attack on an Iranian primary school.
Yeah, their comments contradict Donald Trump's repeated claims that the US might not be behind the bombing which occurred on the first day of the war.
They were responding to a major Sky News investigation into the bombing, which also found that precision weapons were used, as our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire reports.
There is no doubt that this was a school and that 120 children were killed when the missiles hit Minab. But ever since the strike on the very first day of the war, the US has produced conflicting claims at the highest levels about why it was hit and who hit it.
It's horrible what happened, but there were missiles flying all over the place, and somebody said it was our missile. Well, maybe it wasn't our missile, but I've seen nothing to lead me to believe it was. If you come up with the right answer, I don't think it's going to be us.
Well, we can give an answer, and our investigation shows that this wasn't just missiles flying around. This was a precision strike. All the evidence points to US responsibility. 7 independent experts agreed with that conclusion. We spent months combing through footage and satellite imagery to understand the layout of the school. We then worked with research agency Forensic Architecture to rebuild the school virtually, using frames from the videos we found to create a photorealistic 3D layout. We combined that with post-strike footage to show where the missile hit. Here you can see the crater it left, the yellow circle, right in the middle of the school. This is the assembly hall, and it's where witnesses have told us teachers gathered children for their safety after they heard the news that the war had started. That precision strike is exactly how the US carries out attacks.
Well, I can tell you that looking at that post-strike imagery, I knew right off the bat that this was either a US or Israeli strike. You had points of impact that were near dead center in each of these, 7 to 9 buildings that were hit, including the school. This is our common technique, at least for buildings of that size, where you can penetrate through to the center of that building, have ammunition that will be contained where the blast will be contained inside that building.
If it was just the school that had been hit, it might be possible to blame an errant missile. But this was a pattern for the wider complex in Menab, including other civilian buildings. Sky's Data and Forensics Unit has investigated the site. This is that complex that lay next to but separate from the school. It was associated with an Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps missile brigade. Experts told us it was likely administrative in nature. We can reveal that at least 9 of the sites were used by civilians. 5 of them were hit, all right in the centre. This was a clinic and pharmacy, also made public on Instagram and widely reported in local media. It was a well-known landmark in Menab, administered by the IRGC, but used by the public. This was a cultural centre. You can see on satellite imagery that both buildings were levelled. The school children often visited the auditorium inside. Several of the children you see in this video were killed in the strike on the school. Each yellow dot represents a missile strike on the complex. You can see the clear pattern of attack. Tomahawk missiles were used in the strike, and the US is the only belligerent in this war that has them. We also know that one US carrier strike group was in range of Menab. 3 of the ships are Tomahawk capable, and footage publicised by the US shows the USS Spruance firing them towards Iran on the day of the attack. This is all information that is publicly available, even if it took us some digging. The US military has far more resources and a strong moral imperative to identify whether a target is used by civilians. Whatever calculations were made, they went ahead with the strike. And that decision killed scores of children. Tom Cheshire, Sky News.
Well, our international editor, Dominic Waghorn, who is behind much of the reporting in the documentary, is here with us now. You can see the documentary, by the way, if you scan the QR code on screen, but stay with us, don't do that yet. Listen to Dominic first, because get us up to date with the latest on the investigation, because our US correspondent Mark Stone managed to get a question to Caroline Levitt, the White House press secretary, yesterday. So what have we learned?
Yeah, in fact, Mark said when we were out there in Menab, we were the first major news outlet to get to Menab 3 months into the war. And he texted me and he said, I think my job now is to get to the president, is to put this to the president. And he's done an amazing job doing so, talking to and try and get to the CENTCOM commander, Admiral Brad Cooper, and also putting questions to the president. And as you say, yesterday, talking to Caroline Levitt, his press spokeswoman. And what she said, I think I would say is disappointing as someone who's been investigating this, you know, to answer a different question, as we've heard from different administration officials in Congress as well. The question isn't, did you do this deliberately? And so the answer is not, America does not target civilians, you know, and we've heard that from others. And the point they make fairly is that Iran does target civilians, arguably, and they don't. But they're not being accused of that, by most people anyway. They're being accused of hitting a primary school with a ballistic missile by mistake. And in previous incidents, so when they've hit a shelter, for instance, in Baghdad in the Iraq War, or other events in the Afghan War, fairly quickly, in a number of days, at the most 2 or 3 weeks, they've come out and said, yes, we're big enough to admit this is a mistake. It's not what Americans do. And so we're going to try and investigate this. And then, you know, further down the line, they then come out with the outcome of their investigation. This is just, they've not been prepared to do this time round. And it seems it's because Donald Trump is not prepared to admit that America did this. He's twice now said that he thinks it's the Iranians who did this. You had Sir Peter Westmacott on your show an hour or so ago, former British ambassador to America, saying it's absurd for the American president to say that these images of Tomahawk missiles going into the area around the school in Menab were AI generated. You know, it doesn't stand scrutiny. And I think, as the point he made, and also Sir Nicholas Hobson, so 2 former British ambassadors, both saying, you know, it's America's standing, it's America's credibility at stake here. All the evidence, the overwhelming evidence, is that this was America. We have video evidence, silhouetted video evidence of Tomahawk missiles going into a cluster of targets around the school, not for the school, but as Tom was saying there, you know, the evidence is that that crater right in the middle of that school was caused by a Tomahawk missile. So it's impossible really for the Americans to deny they did this, and it is a question of credibility, and therefore it's fair to say, as both Sir Nicholas and Sir Peter have said, it's time for the Pentagon to fess up. And that's just something the American president doesn't seem prepared to do. And therefore, everyone below him isn't prepared to go there as well. So you have this Kafkaesque situation where they say it was human error, but they can't say that it was American humans who made the error.
And this all comes into sharp relief right now, Dom, because the ceasefire has broken down. They're exchanging fire on a regular basis, and perhaps doing so from the American point of view with information and intelligence that may be out of date and just wrong.
Yeah, exactly, and that is the big concern. So it's not just credibility, it's not just, the standing of America and its allies. That's really secondary to the fundamental concern here, which this is an ongoing conflict. And now, as you say, it's picking up tempo again. The MOU is breaking down. America is hitting targets. It hit bridges overnight. It's hit railway stations recently. So these are civilian targets. The bridges are what civilians go over. And in our report, and in the absence of the official investigation publishing its findings, journalists like us, the considerable investigative power of an organisation like Sky News has delved into this. And people are coming out of the woodwork. So whistleblowers from the Pentagon, one crucially in our documentary that you can see on YouTube, saying who was in the targeting community, saying that it was common knowledge that the DIA, the Defence Intelligence Agency database, was not being updated. Some of the information was massively out of date. This school was on maps as a school for 10 years. Yes, the building was part of a military compound in the past, but for 10 years, it's been on Google Maps as a school. It's had its own website. And that fundamental verification and developing, targeters call it, has just clearly not happened in this case. And this whistleblower is saying that's not exceptional. And it's not a secret. And despite that, the Department for War, as it's now called, has been pushing for more and more targets to be hit more and more quickly. So more targets hit in 5 days in this war, according to another whistleblower, Wes Bryant, in our film, than in 6 months of the war in Syria. And he says, as a targeter, I can tell you that it is not humanly possible that all those targets were verified. Now, if that database is still there and being drawn upon, which we can assume it is, then as America goes back to bombarding Iran at full tilt, there is obviously a much greater risk of more schools being hit, of more tragedies like Menab, and more families like those awfully affected, desperate families who we've been interviewed, facing the same trauma and agony. And if the Pentagon is not able to publish its findings, then, arguably the US military can't learn from that, and there is the risk of this happening all over again.
On the targeting, Dom, are they using, is it humans who are picking up the information, or are they starting to use artificial intelligence? We know that the Israelis have used AI for some of their targeting procedures.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And the AI, because it's a developing technology and because it's sort of fundamental to the new approach to warfare that, as you say, not just the Americans, but the Israelis and the British presumably are adopting as well. It's very sensitive. So we don't know exactly how it's being used. We assume it's being used in finding targets, but also presenting to the targeter all the information they have. So one console we were shown by one expert, based on what she kind of knows about what is going on in the US military, it's a bit like a sort of computer game. So it tells you target here, chances of hitting, of collateral damage, reliability, recommendation then. So you can either accept it or not. So her argument is that kind of nudges you towards targeting. Now, we have no idea whether that was at play in this particular tragedy. But I think what we can say is there are questions around what AI is doing in terms of just creating so many more targets so much faster. And the expectation, if you're Pete Hegseth, who has said, we're not fighting under what he says stupid rules of engagement. The pressure that puts on the people below him to come up with huge numbers of targets, which is something he's very boastful about. We've hit more targets than any other American campaign in the past. Then that's that rush to get more targets. If it's based on dodgy data, and we all know from AI, if the data is dodgy originally, and if, in this case, if it's allegedly not being updated quickly enough, then I think it's fair to conclude it's probably likely to lead to more, or certainly the possibility of more of these kinds of terrible tragedies happening.
Dominic, really interesting. And again, the QR code there to see the documentary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, do stay with us. We're going to be talking about the prisoner who's back now in custody after escaping while being taken to hospital. But how did he get away in the first place? We're going to speak to a former prison governor.
jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what? Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Now, a prisoner convicted after attacking 2 women is back in custody after he escaped during a trip to hospital. Marwan Juma absconded after being transferred from a secure facility in North Manchester Hospital on Tuesday evening.
Yeah, so let's talk about this a little bit more. We can speak to former prison Governor John Podmore now. Very good morning to you, John. Thanks so much for joining us. You worked in the prison service, I think, I've written it down, 25 years, is that right? And so you know a lot about these situations. Are you surprised that someone was able to abscond like this? Happily back in custody now, of course, but are you surprised that he managed to do it?
Not really. I mean, it happens. And in terms of, for want of a techie phrase, the custodial environment, going to and coming back from hospital, from a custodial facility, is always the most vulnerable. I mean, if you are intent on escaping, that's the place to do it because the security is less. But it happens when processes aren't followed. So any act of taking someone from a secure facility to somewhere insecure, like a hospital, there are processes, there are procedures, methods of working are written out. And for whatever reason, if those aren't followed, then people can get away. So you could say to me, well, why aren't they followed? Well, we are tending to do the whole sort of security work on the cheap. I mean, there'll be inquiries into these, but I suspect the staff who were responsible were probably very inexperienced, probably poorly trained, probably poorly paid, and probably poorly led. I mean, the prison service is a little bit better. Its staff are better paid and better trained. But most of these most of these movements are by what we call escort contractors. So these are private contractors who are contracted to take people from A to B, and they do it on the cheap. And we need to sort of, look at ourselves and say, well, if we're worried about these people escaping, absconding, then perhaps we need to look more carefully about what we're prepared to pay for to make sure this doesn't happen.
It's interesting, John, is Kamali here. So these contractors, what kind of training are they given? And is the process of doing this kind of transfer with a prisoner the same for all categories? I can't imagine it would be. And should it be the same, do you think, for all categories?
No, there will be a risk assessment. So anyone going from a secure facility to a hospital, there will be a risk assessment. And if it's a category A, a high-risk category A, and I've kind of done this, in the days of the IRA, you have motorcycle outriders, you have helicopters, you have the whole kit and caboodle. So the whole process of taking someone to hospital is expensive, and you reduce the cost with a risk assessment. And it may well be that, the lower the risk assessment, the fewer the staff, and effectively the cheaper it is. So you have to get that essential risk assessment right. But also, I think it's fair to say, from the point of view of the staff, it's not a pleasant task for a member of staff, be that prison staff or custodial staff, because most custodial work is done literally and metaphorically behind closed doors. But if you're taking someone possibly in handcuffs, possibly who's a bit volatile, into a hospital, and there are a few sort of closed secret ways in and secret ways out, and I dare say some viewers may have watch someone come in handcuffs and be treated. And you have to get the balance right between, the humanitarian side of, someone being properly treated for whatever they're in hospital for, and the security elements. And there was lots of controversy many years ago around, women going in to have babies and being handcuffed to prison officers, and heaven forbid, years ago, handcuffed to prison beds. Hopefully that's gone. But getting that balance between security and treatment is a difficult one. So we are asking a lot of staff in doing this. So yes, there needs to be an inquiry. People need to be held to account. But it's important to understand the context, I think.
Well, John Podmore, really interesting to get your take on it. We appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for that, John. Now stay with us here on Mornings, because we're going to speak to Aubrey Allegretti, Chief Political Correspondent from The Times, as we build up to the moment where we hear from Andy Burnham around about midday. Stay with us.
So he's been Labour leader in waiting for weeks, but today Andy Burnham will officially take over the party, and he'll give a speech at midday to mark that moment. So is he ready? What are we going to get? Lots of questions we've got for our next guest, who's Chief Political Correspondent at The Times, Aubrey Allegretti, who's here with us. Very good morning to you. So we get the speech today, probably directed at the Labour Party, probably another speech on Monday when he becomes Prime Minister. Then after that, what do we get, Aubrey? Are we going to have announcements from the off, do you think? What are we going to get from this new Prime Minister?
Yeah, I mean, people around Andy Burnham say that he's been sort of planning this moment for a year's time at least. And of course, he first ran for leader in 2010. So to say that he doesn't have lots of ideas and plans about what he wants to do is absolutely wrong. whether or not those are quite sort of formed into how they can work in government, understanding the levers that you can pull, which parts of Whitehall you can rewire to do different things, that's another aspect in which actually people close to the Access talks involving civil servants say they are surprised at the sort of slight naivety and underpreparedness of some people in Andy Burnham's team. But in terms of what to expect, I think we have been signposted towards big announcements on things like adult social care, possibly sort of steps towards greater public ownership of Thames Water. Their financial accounts recently signified that they are basically only going to be able to kind of keep going for about a year or so. So there are, I think, some popular moves the government wants to take quickly to show and signpost exactly whose side Andy Burnham is on. We've obviously heard a little bit about talk of wealth taxes in recent weeks. He suggested that those are things that he would like to pursue, but not potentially immediately. And so he's going to...
fears of division, didn't he, by introducing wealth taxes?
Exactly, yeah. And there are people, certainly in the Labour Party, who like the idea of harmonising capital gains tax with income tax bans. And so there's going to be quite a lot of frenzied speculation, even after Monday, even after those cabinet appointments, about the big financial decisions he's going to be taking in the next 3 or 4 months in the lead-up to the budget as well.
What about some of the tough decisions he's going to have to take early on in his premiership that are going to be unpopular with his people? I mean, that's going to be the test, isn't it? When he has to do something that is going to upset, you know, the soft left, the left of his party. Which one do you think is coming up that's going to be tricky for him?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a really interesting space we're still in where people are describing it as like the sort of fight for the soul of Andy Burnham. He is, in some ways, it's a sort of positive that he can present himself as being sort of all things to all people. He's sort of liked across the political spectrum, of course, by voters that might have been tempted by reform in Makerfield, but of course, sort of die-hard Labour figures, including on the sort of hard left of the Labour Party. But he is at some point going to have to make decisions. We know that there's going to be at least a sort of £5 billion black hole in the Defence Investment Plan. Lots of people in Andy Burnham's team have complained to me about what they call the cost of Keir, i.e. these sort of legacy announcements that they think are sort of unfunded and that he's going to have to find the money to spend on them. So there is some frustration about that as well, undoubtedly. And fast forward to Monday, there's a lot of concern about Andy Burnham's sort of international sort of experience and policies as well. People are looking at the rhetoric from the White House and Donald Trump, his threats against Iran. They're saying, where are we going to be on Monday if Merz in Germany wants to issue an E3 statement, or Macron in France is standing up and starting to criticise Trump more vocally? Where is Andy Burnham's stance on that?
Although I've seen Andy Burnham's supporters arguing that Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair didn't have much international experience before they came Prime Minister. But how important on Monday as well is his selection of a cabinet? I mean, there's been so much speculation, particularly around the Chancellor. But to what extent does he send a message out to the different wings of his party? Is it about pulling them together? Is it about sending a message to the country about what your intentions are? How important are these appointments, who he puts in these jobs?
Absolutely massive, and it's a question that always follows a leadership contest. How magnanimous are you going to be and sort of open up those senior roles of your party to people across the political spectrum who decided not to run against you, or in previous contests who did? Or, actually, do you reward those sort of die-hard loyalists who've been with you in the trenches and sort of fought for you? I think the impression we're going to get out of Team Burnham on Monday is that they would prefer the former, i.e. to sort of look as though they're not being factional. But, of course, it's impossible, I think, for Andy Burnham to go into government and not have a very clear driving sense of what he wants to do. There's been some surprise, I think, by figures on the soft left and the hard left of the Labour Party at Shabana Mahmood being targeted for the role of Chancellor, given her relative lack of economic experience and the fact that other senior figures like Ed Miliband have been involved in trying to devise economic policy for a Burnham administration. It's going to spark potentially a big sort of can of worms opening in the next sort of 72 hours once he makes those decisions, and upsets and frustrates a lot of people who thought that he was on their side.
Do you want to put your neck on the block and say who it's going to be?
I mean, it genuinely seems like Shabana Mahmood is the sort of closest name in the frame. But I wouldn't be surprised if there is a return of some familiar faces. I mean, Wes Streeting was at one point being touted for it, and his allies certainly thought he could do it. Now they are genuinely concerned that he could only be offered the role of Health Secretary again. Wow. There's other people that could be returning to their roles. Heidi Alexander, a big Burnham fan, she was Transport Secretary, appears like she could be going back there. And then when you look at who is going to be in charge of trying to restore discipline to the Labour Party, you hear again the name Alan Campbell, who won't be known to many people. The Chief Whip is a relatively backroom role, but he did that role, was reshuffled out of it by Keir Starmer last September. So it could be a sort of slightly strange meld of actually bringing some people back into the cabinet, Lucy Powell, Angela Rayner, these figures are not unknown to the country, considering they served in the Starmer administration.
Another old face that's being talked about is David Miliband, of course. I haven't heard him talked about in the last few days, but is that still a possibility that he could come back?
His name seems to have floated away. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, there is this sort of march of the kind of Brownite, you know, the sort of late 2000s cabinet ministers, given James Pennell's coming back in to serve in Andy Burnham's number 10. It'll be interesting just to see. There was an attempt to sort of bring back a lot of Blairite-era figures, I mean, not least Peter Mandelson, but also former Director of Communications for Keir Starmer, Lord Doyle. It didn't sort of seem to work. They were trying to transplant the old onto the new, and I'm sure that those new figures coming into number 10 will have looked at how that worked and where it went wrong, but there is probably a lot of ambitious Labour MPs who will be looking and saying, why aren't you talking to us? Why aren't you bringing us in and giving us those senior roles as well?
Interesting. He's mentioned, I think last night, this idea of working with other parties, specifically around social care. He's mentioned it again previously as well. And we had Zach Polanski sitting where you are, and I put to him this idea of them working together. It's nothing formal, but what do you make of... Is that just rhetoric from Burnham, or does he seriously want to try and work, you know, across the aisle with on social care and then perhaps with the Lib Dems and the Greens on other issues?
I think social care is one of the rare examples where there is the potential for cross-party consensus. And, I mean, the Conservatives are obviously being particularly burnt by it in 2017, so I can absolutely see it working. It's just that if you're going to do that, it will take sufficiently longer than sort of a few people sat in a room trying to decide a specific direction. It means that it's unlikely to sort of, you know, those changes are unlikely to be taking place until the next general election. And some people will say Andy Burnham coming into post hastens when that point might be, because he'll want his own mandate. He might feel that he's tied to delivering the Labour 24 manifesto, and he's got a lot of ideas about how to improve things for the better in the future that go far beyond that. So I think it's still all to play for, but there should be some room for cross-party consensus.
So he could... Sorry, go on.
Sorry. No, I was going to change the subject. I was going to ask about Keir Starmer. What next for him?
Good.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously not coming back for the Labour Special Conference today, where he could have sort of handed over to Andy Burnham. There could have been a moment between them. Instead, basically, the only thing we've had was their time in the chamber together on, I think it was Tuesday, in the Hillsborough Law debate. I think things still feel pretty fractious, and you speak to MPs who are very close to Keir Starmer, and they are incredibly angry and frustrated about what's happened. They've even gone so far as to say, because Andy Burnham sort of opened the can of worms of changing leader, they say he's not himself immune from a potential challenge later down the line. I know it feels silly to talk about so early, but I think it just speaks to the sort of raw anger that some of them are feeling, which was perpetuated by an interview given by Louise Haigh, where she said that they've been preparing for this moment for a year. She obviously meant that they could see the writing on the wall and were trying to sort of build something out of what they could see as the sort of the ashes of the Labour Party forming in front of them, but it did give this impression that there has been a concerted campaign to dislodge him for some time.
Yeah, and sorry, I was just going to ask, do you think he could go early? Because you seem to be suggesting that.
Well, I would
for
say...
the election, that is, for everyone.
Obviously,
As in not leave the post, you mean go for a general election? Yeah.
It'll all depend on the polling, and I can't see a scenario where Andy Burnham, for example, calls an election before he starts to see the Burnham bounce, if it exists. But obviously, if Reform UK continues to be plagued by issues over donations, Nigel Farage potentially facing... Well, he's definitely got one by-election, potentially facing a second, if he's found against by the Standards Commissioner and suspended from Parliament for more than 10 days, then I think he could start to feel as though the momentum's moving in his favour. He can present himself, I think, crucially, as enough of a change candidate in order for it to be worth it, and to sort of distance himself from the past, because the longer, of course, he's in government, the more he'll be tethered to, in voters' minds, the sort of mistakes and frustrations of the last 2 years under Keir Starmer.
Really interesting stuff. Aubrey, thanks very much indeed for coming in. We really appreciate it.
As I mentioned, the Green Party leader, Zach Polanski, joined us a little earlier to discuss, well, how parties might be able to work together on some issues.
Most people in this country are probably happy to see the back of Keir Starmer. There's a sense that this country is at breaking point. We live in rip-off Britain, where we've got this toxic combination of low wages and high bills, and something needs to change. But the change, I think, is quite obvious, and I'm not sure Andy Burnham is ready to commit to it. So I want to see him calling for things like rent controls, making sure we bring in a wealth tax, and also a time where we have a climate crisis. We're in our third heat wave this year. There was a report out last week that said we could have seen 2,000 to 3,000 deaths in the last few months alone. It's outrageous that Andy Burnham is not ruling out new oil and gas licenses. He signed a fossil fuel treaty just a few years ago, and now he's signalling to the world that we're not serious about our climate commitments.
You've said in the past, Zach, that you're not here to work with the Labour Party, you're here to replace the Labour Party. Is that still the case with this new man in charge?
That is still the case. Now, if Andy Burnham, again, as I say, comes along and says, I'm going to put a wealth tax, a 10% tax, a 1% tax on assets of £10 million or more, or a 2% tax on £1 billion or more, I'll applaud that and I'll want to work with that. If he puts in rent controls, by the way, if we frozen rents in 2022, we'd be saving the average UK renter now £2,400 every single year, and we'd be saving the government £2 billion a year. And if you look at the profit margin of your average UK landlord, they'd still be making 4.5 times as much as the average UK business. So rent controls is a win-win all round. It's these kind of policies that are transformative, are big, bold plans, but we can't keep tinkering at the edges. We need a government that are going to do these things. If they're prepared to do these things, I'll work with them.
Are you willing to have a conversation? Have you reached out to them at all? Have they reached out to you?
I did reach out during the Makerfield by-election, and actually his team didn't particularly want to meet. Now, again, I don't want to be churlish. I've bumped into Andy Burnham a couple of times, and I find him personable and friendly, and so that's a good start. And I hope we can move away from some of the toxicity that came out of Starmer's Labour government, particularly personal toxicity towards myself and to the Green Party more widely. I'd really like to move to a fresh footing where actually politicians can focus on policies rather than personalities.
And I wonder if I can ask you about your own personal safety in the sort of the week or so after the killing of Anne Widdecombe and the threats to politicians more broadly. Have you been concerned about your safety, and what are you doing to maintain your security?
I mean, it's never comfortable to talk about your own personal safety on TV, but you're asking me a direct question, so I'll give you a direct answer. I am concerned about my personal safety. There's been several instances in the past few months, including several arrests in relation to threats towards me. I'd also add Gawain Towler, who's one of the senior advisors to reform, not a person I agree with on almost anything. He, on another TV channel, said yesterday, other than Nigel Farage, he's worried about my safety. Now, I don't need him to worry about my safety. I need the government to worry about my safety.
And do you want them to do something?
Well, Reform were offered full state security, it turns out, and turned it down. I've been offered absolutely nothing. I do think when you're a party leader in a country, it just seems obvious that actually there should be a non-partisan approach to whether you're a party leader of the government or a party leader of an opposition party. I think you should be offered similar security arrangements.
And part of your policy is to reform council tax. I mean, what would you actually do that would be different around council tax?
Well, we actually want to abolish it because it's a regressive tax in terms of, I think pretty much every political party has agreed for a long time that council tax doesn't work as a system. I want to replace it with something like a land value tax, so we're actually looking at the value of the land rather than making arbitrary decisions. I know that you're not linking these two things.
Absolutely not.
If someone is owed, if someone owes council tax, they should pay it because that's a tax at the moment. Also happens to be true, though, that we do want to abolish it.
A question on your candidates and selection. Did you know there's been some controversy surrounding some of those people that have been selected? What are you going to do to make sure that the candidates that are put forward for the Green Party are adequate and don't end up having to drop out because of social media posts?
Yeah, so at the moment, we've actually hired an independent consultant to look and review at our vetting processes. I think we can always be better at this, and I can point at other parties, but I'm not going to do that because I'm responsible for my party. So I want to make sure by the time we're at the next election or any by-elections, any candidate does fit and align with all the values of the Green Party.
And you will have seen there's some footage of some activists in Hackney throwing darts, poking holes in a picture of Andy Burnham. I mean, what did you make of seeing that footage of people who are sort of acting, working for the Green Party, doing that sort of thing?
Well, so I condemn that stunt utterly because I condemn political violence. It's also really important to say that not a single one of them was a Green Party activist and certainly not a Green Party councillor. They weren't there when it happened. But nevertheless, political violence is political violence. I don't want to see stunts like that.
Zach Balansky talking to us earlier.
Indeed. Let's take a look at the weather.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, today looks mainly dry and warm. Locally, it'll be hot, but heatwave conditions are going to be confined to the southwest this weekend. Mostly warm and dry now. Misty low cloud over northern and eastern parts will bring with it the risk of some rain. That cloud there is going to mostly clear the coastal regions this morning, leaving plenty of sunshine. North East England and northern Scotland look slow to brighten. Further outbreaks of rain are possible there. It's going to be a little bit less hot, although southern parts may still reach 30 degrees.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Now, coming up, as the summer holidays start, how prepared are your children if they need to react in an emergency? We're joined by two boys whose quick thinking saved a life.
Opening hours of the war on Iran, a primary school was hit by a missile designed to blow up military bunkers.
What I've seen, that was done by Iran.
We've been investigating.
Can you explain why you cannot reveal what happened in Minab?
Denial, denial.
And we've travelled to Minab. Grave after grave is overwhelming. To gather evidence and talk to victims.
I just have a question, why?
An interview that lasted nearly 5 minutes. We talked about Prime Minister Starmer. We talked about the special relationship with who he said. It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
Everything in America feels kind of torn in two right now, and it has been an intense few weeks for Minneapolis.
How many more people have to die?
This is not America.
A large and growing protest movement. They're vocal and they're angry.
Are these immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
We just arrived in Doha, just ahead of President Trump, and look at that. The horse-backed military, and beyond them, the skyline of a city transformed.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
What do America's Christian faithful make of the president's pop at the Pope?
The ones that vote for him are going to vote for him through thick and thin.
Before anybody criticizes the Pope, they need to think more than twice.
Mark Stone from Sky News. Will you stop buying Russian energy? Is there any assurance for Palestinian self-determination? Of course. It's a big shift by President Trump.
Shift. This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's a big shift. It's very positive.
Sky News, the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Big Sky News journalist. Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Well, as the schools break up for the holidays, more children will be spending their time outdoors, hopefully. So how prepared are your kids if they need to react in an emergency? Researchers highlighted gaps in children's practical skills and should the unexpected happen.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this issue because it's an incident that is extraordinary that we want to tell everybody about. We can speak to pilot at Wiltshire and Bath Air Ambulance, Simon Goff, and he's joined by Dominic Kelly, who was injured on a mountain bike ride, and Henry Sparrowhawk, who called the emergency services during the incident. So, welcome to all of you. Really good that you can talk to us. Dom, tell us, first of all, what happened to you. You were out with Henry on a bike ride, weren't you? But something went a bit wrong. Talk us through it.
Well, Henry and I have been friends for a while now. And in January, we decided to go mountain biking. The weather was cold and icy. We were familiar with the jumps in the area. We wanted to try a new one, and we came across this new one. And as I was doing the jump, I lost control, pressed my brakes too hard, hit my head on the ground, and the bike landed on top of me.
Oh, wow. So then, Henry, you leapt into action. What did you do?
Well, at first I thought it was just a normal crash, like all mountain bikers will have crashes, and I thought it was a crash that he'd be okay and walk away. But went to check on him, I realised he wasn't, but it was okay because he was breathing and he was sort of semi-responsive. So I put him in the recovery position, put some layers on him to keep him warm, and asked 2 dog walkers who are close to help me.
Henry, that's fantastic. I'm so impressed by that. And, you know, there are a lot of adults watching that wouldn't know what to do, so that's incredible. And tell us, Simon, how you got involved then. Did someone give you a call? Was that Henry or was that one of the other people that were helping him?
Yeah, so Henry got the passes my way to make the call, and using what 3 words, which Henry provided, we were able to use the air ambulance to get to their location in about 4 minutes. Where we were able to land on really close to the scene. They were in a forest, so the what 3 words gave us a perfect location in the forest, and we were able to land near them. Within 2 minutes of landing, got to them, and then, as you saw from the pictures there, airlifted Dom to hospital, where I'm really pleased to say he made a full recovery. So yeah, what 3 words was vital.
Yeah, and just, Simon, so everyone knows, because not everyone's across what 3 words app is, and it is really useful in these sort of situations, isn't it?
Yeah, so 85% of emergency services use the What 3 Words app, and essentially it's a free app that you can download on your phone. You put in your location. It gives you 3 individual, uniquely identifiable words that covers the 3-metre grid square that you're in, anywhere in the world. As I say, most of the emergency services use this now, so not only do they know exactly where you are, they can identify to within 3 metres where you are.
So, Dom, talk us through what it was like for you. After you hit your head, we heard Henry saying that you were sort of semi-responsive. How conscious were you of what was going on? Were you aware that a helicopter was landing to take you to hospital?
No, not really. All I can really remember were 2 spaniels comforting me being really cold.
Oh, my goodness. But then it's so good that you've made a full recovery. It's so good to see you sitting there all fine and well. That's great news. But, Henry, what have you learned from all of this? Your quick reaction has obviously made a massive difference in this situation. Have you got a message to other people who are going out on a trip or might just have an accident completely unpredicted? What would your advice be for what they should do?
Probably just make sure you know what to do in an emergency. Like, what I did was pretty basic first aid, but it all helps. So make sure you know how to contact emergency services, how to locate where you are, and what to do.
And Henry, had you learnt first aid before? I mean, I guess you knew what the recovery position was. Was that something you did independently, or was that through school? I mean, how did you know? Because there are lots of people who just wouldn't even know how to put someone in the recovery position.
Yeah, so I learned that with Scouts. My dad's a Scout leader, but I also learned about what 3 words there. So, on an expedition or camping, I know the idea was we all knew how to, basic first aid and how to get help.
Nice.
And Simon, were you quite impressed with how quick the reaction was and how effective the reaction was? I mean, what's your experience of being responsive to emergencies? Are other people as well informed as these guys were?
Yeah, I was really impressed. Recent surveys have shown that about 1/3 of children don't know how to dial 999 and don't know the 999 number. Also, 1/3 of children don't know how to locate exactly where they are. So my advice would be very simple. In advance of the summer, try and get the family together or guardians together, do a rehearsal of what to do in an emergency, because it may not be in your home, which you're probably familiar with. It could be on a campsite, it could be in an Airbnb somewhere. Understand the what 3 words if you can download that and use that, but just really rehearse how to make that 999 call. We hope you never need it, in the same way we hope you never need our service, but as a charity, we're there if you ever should need us.
Yeah, really solid advice that everyone should take up as we're going into the summer break. And Dom, then to you, are you back on the bike? Back out doing those jumps?
Yeah, I had a concussion and a bleed on my liver, but after the 6 weeks of advised recovery, I was back on the bike with proper coaching, a new bike, and a full face helmet that I'd saved up for.
Oh, good for you, Dom. I'm really glad to hear you recovered, mate. Well done.
Yeah. Well, so good to chat to you all. Dom, glad you're feeling better. Henry, well done to you, because your quick actions have made a massive difference. And Simon, thanks very much indeed for joining us as well and giving some really good tips for people to avoid danger if they get into trouble. Thanks all very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And enjoy your summer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Brilliant
It's a great
stuff.
backdrop with the helicopter behind.
It is, and I like that
Yeah,
drop.
extraordinary.
Well, look, that's it from us for now. We're going to build up now to Andy Burnham's speech.
Yeah, exactly. Join Sophie Ridge in just a moment.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player